Welcome to a very special series presented by GayTalkRadio.org and QueerPublicRadio.com. In this series, Gay Talk Radio and Queer Public Radio will feature the complete audiobook Invisible Hand, written by Larry K. Mason. Although this audiobook is a fictional account, it could be true. Mr. Mason has designed this concept of a completely new monetary system which would, by itself, catapult the world into a caring, loving environment that we have all dreamed of. To explain his concept, Mr. Mason wrote this book and provides it for free on the internet. Mr. Mason decided to write this book, Invisible Hand, to explain the new system he proposes, which has the ability to change our world as we now know it. With his permission, Gay Talk Radio and Queer Public Radio present this wonderful concept for your listening pleasure and serious consideration. For more information, you may visit Mr. Mason's website at nopom.info. That's NOPOMINFO. nopom.info. On with the show.
Invisible Hand, Chapter 12, The Screws Tighten, in which even presidential power has its limits. Buddy hangs in there, and Clark gets his ID. Okay, what did you want to see me about this time? The president said resignedly. His face was careworn, almost gray. The eyes that had sparkled and glowed with intensity during the early days of his campaign for office were becoming dull. The body sagged with fatigue. The small tremor in the left hand was becoming noticeable enough that the president was in the habit of keeping it in his lap or pocket. There's good news and bad news as usual, Mr. President. As you know, in my capacity as Secretary of Homeland Security, I've been coordinating the collection of information for internal security. We've been able to make suggestions to many of the leaders of industry that they go along with our plans for getting through this oil shortage crisis. We've put in place tracking mechanisms for following production of all the major capital goods and the bulk of consumer goods. We can tell you where every truckload of gasoline and oil has been sent. We know where wheat and cotton and other consumer goods are and where they're going in real time. The problem is down at the lowest level. We do an inventory somehow. There's always a lot of missing merchandise. It doesn't matter about the consumer goods in most cases, but the gasoline and oil and such, they're too important to let slide. We think that they're stealing gas and selling it on the black market. They take out a few gallons here and there and replace them with water or whatever to make the total right, and then sell the gas for all the market will bear. What did you expect? That's what always happens when something's in short supply. That's what happened with Prohibition. It happened with illegal drugs. What do you think we can do about it? That's the good news, sir. We've been able to create a single distributed database using all the data we've been getting from all the businesses and government agencies and also our covert data collection points. What do you mean, covert data collection points? You remember that we've been using the computer monitoring chips in all the U.S.-built computers, and we've been including those chips in TVs and other major appliances for home use, and, well, just about anywhere you have a computer chip of any power. It's collecting data for us. It's getting so that in the cities you can be monitored almost anywhere you go. Well, we've been working really hard to make all that available in one distributed database with centralized control. I think we have it now. You can take an individual, almost any individual, and I can tell you where they are and what they're doing. You're kidding. No, really. Just give me the name of someone and I'll show you. Okay. How about Congressman Frobisher? What's that old SOB doing? Hang on a minute. Johnny on the spot. Congressman Prescott Frobisher. Live feed, sound and image. Holman said into his personal digital assistant and then held it out for the president to see. The sound of a gentle snore filled the room, and the image of Frobisher, his body slumped in his chair behind his desk, appeared on the screen. Don't know as well I don't envy that old fart. Look at him asleep. Not a care in the world. After what he did to us, I'd like to see him roasting in hell. Well, he's unimportant now. Having his guts for garters wouldn't do us a bit of good. You say this image is from his computer? From the angle of the shot, I would say it was, but it could be from his TV or even his refrigerator if he has one in his office. I can ask the computer if you really want to know. No, it doesn't matter. So how are we going to use this to save gas? Well, the biggest problem we had was that we knew that a lot of people were stealing a little gas here and there to sell on the black market, and we could catch any of them we wanted to just by putting a man on to watch them like we're watching Frobisher. But we'd have to watch all day and every day until they did something illegal. The problem was that there are millions of these petty thieves out there, and we just don't have the personnel to watch what each person is doing all the time. Sure, if there's someone important like the head of a corporation, we can watch him because he's important enough to devote manpower to him. But these little nickel and dime operations are so numerous and so small scale that we just can't do it that way. So we aren't much better off than we were before, except at the top, the president sighed. No, sir, we're much better off now. That's the good news I wanted to bring you. We now have the computing power, and even more important, the software, to let the computer monitor people for us. We don't need the human staff. I can ask the computer to monitor everyone who sells gas, and we can have a listing of everyone who has stolen gas and sold it during the last week. We can have the computer do it for us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, every day of the year. How can the computer tell if the person's stealing? That seems like pretty human judgment to me. Well, I don't know for sure. I know they pay attention to whether the person is putting something into a gas tank or taking something out of it. I know they keep a total of how much gasoline should be in each tank. I'm not sure how they tell exactly, but they tell me it's right over 90% of the time. So what are you going to do, arrest 3 million people for stealing gas? No, of course not, sir. What I propose is this. First, we notify each of the people who steals the gas that we know about it. We tell them the date and time of the theft and how much they took and who they sold it to. We fine them, say, 10 times the money they got for the stolen gas. We tell them that if they do it again, we'll shut down their access to gas altogether. They won't have any idea how we know, so they'll have to figure that the people they sold it to ratted on them. Naturally, we can come down hard on the organized crime guys who are stealing by the tanker load. You think that'll solve the stolen gas problem? How much gas will that save? We think it'll save about 10% of the supply of gas that's being wasted now. Well, that'll certainly help. Go ahead with that plan, then. Have you got any good news about the unemployment or the heating oil or the food supply? No, sir. But we've got bigger farms in line, and the smaller farms are turning more to truck farming. They want to barter rather than sell their crops for money, what with this inflation and all. Also, I think we'll produce enough food, so we'll be okay in that line anyway. It's the heating that we're having trouble with. We're increasing our coal production for electricity, but those coal-fired power plants turn out a lot of air pollution, and the people downwind are going to have a lot of acid rain and such until we can replace the old power plant technology. I'm going to leave all that up to you. Do the best you can to get us ready for the transition. We have to have all the monitoring and surveillance equipment in place and the computer monitoring functioning smoothly by then, or we'll never keep the lid on when this crazy money thing falls flat on its face. I have my hands full now with the international situation. Practically every nation in the world where we owe money, and that's most of the world, is having a fit over our going to this new money system. They claim it's just a fancy way to renege on our debts. I keep trying to tell them that after a few months at most, we'll go back to the old system and we'll be able to pay our debts then, but they don't seem to believe me. What's wrong, honey? You look like you've been sucking a lemon. Come go for a walk with me and tell me your troubles. Loiselle took Buddy by the arm and gently pulled him toward the door. You've been cooped up in that office all day. You need the exercise. Trust me, you'll feel much better for a little exercise. Besides, your brain will work better if you get rid of some of that stress. Oh, all right. Are you sure you want to go walking with a grouch, though? But you're my favorite grouch in all the world. I love you just as much whether you're grouchy or not. Loiselle got him outside, linked her arm through his, and rested her head on his shoulder. Remember how we used to walk like this when we were in college together? Remember how sweet it was to stroll through the campus, arm in arm, thinking about our future together? Buddy had a moment of guilt as he remembered what he had been thinking about during those walks, but, like any good husband, he kept such information to himself. Yes, darling, but I had no idea our future would be like this. You know what those federal rascals have done now? They sent me a quota for this year. So much soybeans, so much pork, so much chicken, and so on. It's like they want to tell me what to plant, how to plant it, and every little thing. It's like they owned these acres instead of me. I told them I didn't have the gas to do all that, and they said they'd let me keep more of the diesel oil we make, but only if I grew what they wanted. They also had a few threats in case I decided to go it alone. Oh, they tried to dress it up as good fatherly advice, but it was clear they think they can run us out of business if we don't go along. What are we going to do? Are we going along with what they want, like last fall? Are we going to fight them? I don't know how we can fight them, dear. I have over 300 men working for me on the farms and in the mills and such. If we fight, I don't know how many of them would stick with us and how many would run. If even a third quit, that would leave us in bad shape. You can't run a mill for long with a third of your people missing. On the farms, it would be even worse. All those hogs and chickens would be starving, and we couldn't even get the feed to them. If they take all our gas, we can't do hardly anything. What I'd have to do is break up the big farms into little farms, each with 1 or 2 men running them, with just what they had right there. They'd have to have some way to feed the stock from their local farm with no outside help. With a couple of years to prepare, we might be able to feed half our present stock, but if we start right now and tried it, we'd have to slaughter about 3/4 of our animals, and the rest would be on short rations. I just don't see any way we can do this. Can't you just buy gas from people without using the rationing system? Well, we might have last year, but that market has dried up. From what I hear, you can't get gas at all without having that ration. It's like suddenly everyone is law-abiding, at least when it comes to gas. Rumor has it that the feds have some new system that lets them find out about every single violation of the ration laws. I would have thought that impossible, but it seems to be happening. Last week, Jerome was complaining to me about how the feds were telling him what to grow. He said they threatened to expose certain facts from his past if he didn't go along. You know, like they did with that movie star who was objecting to the identity checks. I mean, it's like they know everything that's happening all the time. I can't even go to the bathroom without feeling that someone's watching. But they can't do that, can they? I mean, don't we have a constitutional right to privacy? And anyway, I haven't seen anything on the news about it or in the paper. Surely there'd be someone who'd complain about it. Honey, the papers are printed by people who have secrets they'd rather keep, too, and the news broadcasts are censored as well. You remember that the National Freedom Act they passed last year to give the FCC and Homeland Security the right to stop the publication of any story that would be against the national interest and a comfort to terrorists? Well, that means that if the administration doesn't like a story, it doesn't let it be broadcast. We don't have a free press anymore. I'm not sure what freedoms we do have left that the government can't take away and call it legal. Dear, remember that Clark's money will take effect next year. Then everything will be all right. We just have to hold on until then. But he gave her a big hug and said, You're right, dear. We just have to hang on until next year. If we can just make it till 2013, we'll be just fine. But behind Buddy's big smile and confident voice, he wasn't thinking that way at all. In his heart, he felt they were all doomed to a life of complete government controls. He had never heard of any illegal substance, whether it was drugs or sex or gambling, that wasn't available on the black market. If the government could stop the owners of gas stations from selling a few gallons on the side, and could also stop organized crime from doing the same thing on a large scale, then they had a grip on the people that was stronger than anything Buddy had ever heard of. Buddy was scared right down to his socks. Are you going to do it, Clark? What choice do we have? How are we going to live if we don't? We don't have to work in Washington, you know. We can go outside the city to some of the small towns around here, in Virginia, for example. How's that going to help? You really think they don't have computers and rations and police out in the suburbs? You want to go live in the hills catching rabbits and deer and making clothes out of hides? Unless you want to completely give up civilization altogether, I don't see how you can escape it. You either let them identify you onto the computer, or they arrest you and force it on you, or they just don't let anyone sell you food. I mean, they've got you no matter what you do. But won't they be able to know everything you do if you let them make an ID for you? Yes, but they already can do that. They've been keeping records on most people for at least 18 months now. How do you think they passed that National Freedom Act so easily? They had the dirt on every member of Congress. They didn't even have to arrest any of them. They just let them know what they would release to the media if the Congress didn't do what they wanted. Enough caved in that the administration didn't even have to talk to some, like old Frobisher. They let him talk against the bill and all, but he doesn't have an important committee chairmanship or anything. He doesn't have much influence now that the 10 Points bill is passed. They let him rant and rave about loss of freedoms and just didn't let the media report it to the nation. You mean it's too late to do anything about it? Well, what could we do, for goodness sakes? We can't get a conspiracy going. They'd know about it within hours. We can't go to the streets and form a mob because the citizens of this fair nation are like sheep heading to the slaughter. They have no idea what they're being threatened by. So long as they're warm and fed and have their electric toys, they're happy. They don't even care that the government's controlling all their access to information, even the internet. I tried editing some of the files on the old 10 Points website, and it wouldn't let me. Said I didn't have the right password. But won't people realize that? What good will it do when they realize it? There's nothing they can do. This administration is in office for as long as it likes. Whoever is in control of that computer system is in control of everybody. They've got us by the short hairs. I tell you, it's like 1984, but 30 years late. Oh, Clark, it can't be that bad. There are still editorials against the administration. There are still news items that show them failing at things. They're still in opposition. Those things don't matter, really. They're just for show. Everything the administration wants, it gets. They're even telling industry what to produce now. They have some computer program that divides up what the government wants produced and sends quotas or some such to each company. They try to say it's part of the rationing program and just for the duration of the emergency, but you wait and see. They'll keep it up, and before long you won't even be able to choose your own job. But they can't just control everybody that way. People would never stand for it. They're already standing for it. Why did all the major industries fall in line with the rationing plan with hardly a murmur of dissent? Why aren't people taking to the streets about this national ID thing? They're sheep, I tell you, sheep. But we didn't have hardly any starvation last winter. And anyway, well, I got my ID last week. I haven't noticed any problems. In fact, now I don't have to have my credit card. I just talk to the computer at the store and it knows who I am. It's really convenient. And you know how I used to have to write down my passwords for using the computer? Well, now I just turn it on and talk to it and it knows who I am. I don't need that password, whatever it was. What about all your personal information that the businesses have been collecting about you over the years? You know those cards you let them scan when you wanted to get the discount? Well, I understand that all those databases have been taken over by the rationing system. They not only can identify you, they know what you eat for breakfast. They know what medicines you take, and they know how much you drink. They know more about you than we knew about Lincoln. Your medical records are now in that damn computer. If you need medication like, say, insulin, then you can't get it without their permission. So if you're a diabetic, are you going to be able to stand up against the government? If your business depends on getting goods from some other business, the government will know and be able to shut you down by denying you access to those goods. There probably are no more than 500,000 people in the U.S. who are in any kind of position to object to anything this administration does. But it will be all right when the 10 points takes effect, won't it? Dream on, girl, dream on, Clark snorted. Clark's phone rang. Clark flipped it open and said, "Hello? Your appointment for getting your ID has been changed to 4 o'clock this afternoon in room 336 Freedom Hall. Please be on time." "Who is this?" Clark demanded. There was no answer. At 4 p.m., Clark reported to room 336 of Freedom Hall. The building was quite modern, with insulated glass which could be set to allow the heat in during cold weather and reflect it in hot weather. The decor was warm and cheerful, with amusing art and soothing colors. The receptionist was cheerful and friendly, directing Clark to a small room with a chair and some impressive equipment. Clark was reluctant to go in, but a gray-haired woman old enough to be his grandmother entered first and invited Clark to sit before the instruments. "What is this? It looks like some futuristic gadget for fitting glasses or something." "This will get the retinal image from your eyes. It's painless. Just put your chin on the supports and look through the eyepieces." "There, that was easy, wasn't it?" Clark had hardly had time to blink. "Please place your hand on this pad." "Thank you. Now your other hand." Before Clark had time to think, let alone object, the woman turned on what appeared to be a small vacuum cleaner and brushed it over his hair a couple of times. She smiled at Clark and said, "That should do it, darling. Now if you will just walk out the other way down this hall, you will find an easy exit." "But wait, what did you do?" "We got your retinal images as I told you. We took your fingerprints on both hands. We got your odor and a sample of your DNA from your hair. We got images of your face from those cameras there in the corners of the room, and the chair measured your weight. As you walk down the hallway there, the computer will note your way of moving. We'll be able to match these features up with your dental records in case your body is found and is difficult to identify. I think that it's so comforting to your family to know for sure whether the body found is really yours or not, don't you?" Clark was almost shaking as he walked down the hallway. His body? What was she talking about? His body? At the end of the hallway on the left was another door marked "Exit" in red letters. He pushed, but nothing happened. The door behind him, however, did open, and a young man who looked 19 or 20 beckoned him to follow. Clark felt like running, but when he looked back down the hallway, the gray-haired lady was smiling at him and nodding. He went where the young man indicated. "Mr. Minton, please have a seat." The youngster gestured to a soft-looking chair that looked like it would probably recline if asked. Clark tried to sit on just the front edge of the chair, but the chair almost imperceptibly demanded that he lean back to savor the comfort of the welcoming cushions. Within a few seconds, Clark was leaned back and relaxed. "I understand that you're somewhat nervous about the national ID system. I'm hoping I can allay your fears. You see, there really is nothing to be afraid of. Just think back a couple of hundred years. Almost everyone lived in a farm or in a village where everybody knew them on sight. Everywhere you went and everyone you met was familiar. So if a dangerous stranger came into the village, everyone would know at once to be suspicious. Everyone would keep an eye on that stranger. This meant that the community could defend itself against an outside threat. Today, we're surrounded by strangers. There are terrorists who will even sacrifice their own lives to damage us. We can't keep everyone out, but we can know our own. We can separate those who are part of our community from those who are outsiders. Naturally, we welcome tourists who only want to enjoy our resorts and many attractions, but we must be able to defend ourselves against that terrorist threat. Surely you can see that, Mr. Minton. Clark found himself nodding. Our computer system, which is the most sophisticated in the world, I'm proud to say, can keep watch for us. It can provide that watchful eye on the stranger which ordinary people can no longer provide. It can detect the dangerous act almost before it happens. It is our most certain defense against terrorism. Sadly, some people don't recognize this strong defense as being good. They fear it'll be used against loyal Americans in an attempt to control their lives. But let me assure you that there is no such intent on the part of this administration. This system is purely defensive. If that were not the case, surely it would be used in cases in which young men such as ourselves make injudicious remarks in unguarded moments. Surely such young men would be brought to account. There's no doubt that they would be arrested as traitors to America, even if they had connections in high places. They wouldn't be allowed to spread sedition and false rumors about the intentions of the administration. They might find their rations canceled or find themselves one of those unfortunates who have no job. But you know, Mr. Minton, such things are not happening. I mean, you are yourself a young man, and I'm sure that you, like me, have said some things which we agree were injudicious and even silly. Perhaps we were trying to impress some young woman with our daring, or perhaps we wanted to see how gullible they were. Maybe we even believed to a small degree what we were saying. But just between us, Mr. Minton, what we said was really not quite the thing in these perilous times. Our nation really is under serious threats, both internal and external. It's at these times that we must keep our heads and show the leadership which persons of our background and education know is within us. We must help the others, those who are less well educated and less knowledgeable about the world, to accept what is being done for them and the decisions being made on their behalf. You and I both know that this national ID is a necessary part of the defense of America, and that it will greatly cut down on crimes of all sorts. It will make life easier and safer for everyone. Everyone, that is, who is not working against the best interests of the American people. For those who would harm America, it will make life very difficult indeed. Well, Mr. Minton, I'm glad we could have this little talk. I'm sure that you feel much better now about our situation. I'm sure that you feel much better now about your situation, much more secure knowing that by getting your ID, you are helping to defend America against the terrorist threat and making life easier and safer for all those around you. Clark automatically accepted the hand extended toward him by the smiling youth, who thereby assisted Clark to get out of the ever-so-comfortable chair. Clark found himself nodding once again, and, almost in a trance, left the room. This time the exit sign spoke the truth, and the door opened easily on another part of the main lobby. The decor was the same. The colors were still soothing, but somehow Clark found himself trembling slightly, his hands clammy, his back covered with cold sweat. He felt like he had just been threatened. He felt like he had just been told to stay in line or he'd have a serious struggle to survive. He wanted to run, but had no idea in what direction. He felt like a rat in a maze with no cheese at the end. He left Freedom Hall and went out onto the streets of the capital. The weather was delightful, still warm from late summer, but with the first coolness of the coming autumn. The trees were still green, and many of the cars had their windows open. The occasional convertible, some with handsome men or beautiful women, went by, but Clark was in no mood to appreciate the scenery. "Why can't we bring these charges? With the evidence we've got, we could have an indictment in no time." "Look, the Attorney General says we're to leave them alone. You want to argue with him? Be my guest." "But these are the big boys. These are some of the top heads of organized crime. We have audio and video of them ordering killings and directing prostitution and drugs and smuggling. You name the crime, we have them cold on it." "You just don't get it, do you? These guys are helping us out with our oil problems. They have contacts all over the world. They can come and go where our officials can't even think of going. They're responsible for getting millions of barrels of oil from Russia and the Middle East. They get tankers from South America despite their embargo on oil to the U.S. Are you telling me they get a free hand here to run their crimes so long as they bring in the oil? That's about the size of it, yes. They scratch our itch, and we leave them alone. How many lives do you think that oil they bring in saves? How many jobs would be gone now if that oil didn't reach our ports? Sure, we could put these guys in jail, but what good would that do? Somebody else would just take their places. You think organized crime happens just because a few people are mean enough and powerful enough to be the thugs? No, son. It's because they can make big money doing it. How much money do you think they get for one tanker of oil? If the oil companies could get it legally or illegally on their own, don't you think they'd have done it by now? Well, these organized crime guys can apply pressure even on governments, and those they can't force, they can trick or bribe. So what am I to do with all this evidence? Throw it away? Don't be silly. Keep it safe. In fact, keep more than one copy and hide them in different places. That evidence could come in handy later. Boy, look at that. She's really hot. Look at what she's doing. God, what I wouldn't give to have her in the sack. Are you recording this? Every second of it. Luckily, we came in before she started to undress, so we got the whole thing. With a little editing, this can make us some big bucks on the international market. We might want to change her face a little, maybe make her look more like somebody famous, and we can always put in different backgrounds, so it'll be hard to identify where she is. Look, she's climaxing. It just keeps going and going. No wonder she worked so hard at it. How much of the afterglow do you think we should get? All of it, just as long as she keeps moving or making sounds. They can always edit it out at their end if they don't want it. This ought to get us 10 or 15, don't you think? More, I should think, because she's so natural and so young. This is prime cut stuff. There just aren't any professionals that look like that. I mean, it's obvious she thinks she's alone because of the way she ignores the camera. She has no idea she's being watched and taped. Of course, we'll have to crop the picture a little because she isn't centered in the frame and such, but that's easy. Are you sure we can get away with this? I mean, this is a government installation and government equipment we're using here. I don't think those cameras and microphones and the computers are supposed to even be known about by the public. What if my boss catches us? Then you get the shaft. What do you think? But he ain't catching you because you set up a monitoring program on him. If he gets even suspicious, you'll know and we can change our operation. Now, have you got any more of these? Maybe some Oriental or black girls? Shoot, yes. I set up the filter to find people taking off their clothes, and I must have gotten 10,000 hits the first day. And that was even restricting it to women between 15 and 30. The problem is that you have to go through lots of not-so-good stuff to find the really good ones, and it all takes time. The computer isn't very good yet at knowing who's pretty and who's not. Also, I don't dare have it record all of them, since that would be noticeable. So I find some pretty ones and watch them until I find one that does some interesting stuff. Then I revisit her at times she's likely to be performing until I catch her right. Swell, but have you got them on tape already? Well, no. It may be days before I catch another one like this. Okay, here's what we'll do. I'll bring in some recording gear, and you have the computer feed as many streams as the gear can handle to my recorder. Then we'll look over the streams we got to see what's best. We should be able to speed up your operation quite a lot that way without it showing up on your records. When we get it smoothed out, we should be able to get 10 to 20 of these sessions a day. But they're just women masturbating. Don't we want more variety than that? Of course, especially if there's some perversions. But I thought your filter was set for just young women. Well, it is. But I don't like to see other guys getting what I can't have, so I didn't follow up on those. There's lots of them with couples making out, too. We have a gold mine here, my boy. I don't know about this. If we do too much of this, we're likely to get caught. We have a chance-in-a-lifetime opportunity here, and you turned chicken on me. I ain't chicken. I'm the one who set it up in the first place, ain't I? I'm the one who told you about it, wasn't I? But this that I'm doing is small scale. It's easy to miss what I'm doing. What you want to do is big scale. That's going to make waves. If we put out lots of these things, there's some of them going to get back to the U.S., and anybody who's in on the monitoring program is going to know they must have been made using our secret gear. Then they'll start checking on everybody who does monitoring, and the chances of being discovered go way up. Okay, we'll be discreet and make sure we cover up as much as we can about how these things were recorded. I've got the software that can replace everything but the actors with whatever background we like. We can even make the camera angle appear to move so it seems like there's a live cameraman doing the filming. Trust me on this. I know what I'm doing. Yeah, right. You probably have a good lawyer, too. But I don't. I'm just a computer geek. You're the operative with all the field experience and all the contacts. You're the guy who's got all the underworld friends. You're the guy who says he can make us rich with this. Calm down. We'll be very careful. We'll sell to the most select markets only. And they'll sell to everybody and his brother. Once you sell one of these things, it's out of your control. There's no telling where it'll go, and it's all digital. Making copies won't degrade the picture to the point that nothing is recognizable. That 100th copy is just as sharp and clear as the original. Every hint and clue as to how we're getting this stuff is right there, clear and sharp in all the copies. I'm telling you, this is only going to work if we keep it small scale and control all the copies. Listen, boy, you think you're the only one who's making these films? There must be 50 guys and probably some women, too, who are making pirate copies of what they can see with this stuff. You think the market isn't going to be flooded with these things in a year or two? We've got to get our stuff out there while there's still a good market for it, before the flood of this stuff drives the price down. I never thought of that. You don't think you're the only monitor who has computer skills, do you? You don't think the guys who put this thing together were ignorant of what it could do? Why, probably half the people who applied for these monitoring jobs are secret voyeurs. If they weren't, this job would bore the pants off them. And you just know most of them are going to realize they can make copies of this stuff and sell them. They're bound to. Look how popular reality television was a few years ago. This is reality television on steroids. There's big money in this, but it's only going to last a short time, and then the market will be saturated and the price will go down because there'll be so many suppliers. We have to strike while the iron's hot, boy. We have to go for it now, full throttle. But what if we get caught? Then we lose our gamble. There's risks in everything, especially things that pay off big time like this will. Besides, you already took the biggest risk when you told me what you had access to. But that risk is paying off for you because you could never have carried this off on your own, and you really can trust me. I'll take good care of you, really good care. Damn potholes, that one almost took out my suspension system. I'll probably have to get the tire rebalanced. Why the hell can't they fix these streets right, for God's sake? Dear, you always told me it was because they used the low bidder on all the road projects. That's no excuse. Can't they oversee those guys and make sure they use decent materials and good workmanship? All it would take would be one or two honest guys going around to visit the repair crews. But weren't you complaining about the council being hand in glove with the developers? Weren't you saying that they scratch each other's backs with contracts and campaign contributions? Why should the inspectors not be on the take, too? I remember hearing about Chicago back in the last century having building inspectors and whatnot who would take payoffs from the crime bosses to let them get away with all sorts of overcharges and inferior materials in their work. How can you expect anything else here? I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I'll vote for anyone who'll get the streets fixed so they can stay fixed without raising taxes. Okay, Strather, how do you explain this? Your salary is only $178,000 a year with the Bureau, and yet you spent over $200,000 on your vacations to Atlantic City and Vegas in the last year, and you somehow managed to pay off your $600,000 mortgage 22 years ahead of time. Investments. I made some very good investments. I play the market, and I've done very well at it. You do indeed play the market, don't you? You've done very well. How much would you say you profited over the last year playing the market, Strather? $1 million? $2 million? $5 million? Well, more like $20 million, actually. And what was your starting investment, if I may be so bold as to ask? $5,000. $5,000. And when did you begin investing? Well, it was back in 2010, August, I think. And how did you do for the first 6 months that you invested? The market wasn't doing too well in those days, if I remember correctly. Not so good. I lost about half my money. So to what would you attribute this startling turnaround in your investment fortunes, Strather? Did you find a four-leaf clover? Did you invest in rabbit's feet? Did you marry a witch? Well, I learned to do better. I learned more how to tell the good companies from the bad. Your first very successful investment seems to have been selling short on what had been a high-flyer stock. You sold short right before the news broke that some of the officers in the corporation were looting the company and moving to South America. Just how did your new insight let you know that that company's top officers were a bunch of swindlers? Well, I don't know. It just seemed to me to be a company that had reached its peak in its price and would decline soon. So it was just a coincidence then. I guess you could say that, yes. So next you sold short in several other companies, and in each case they shortly failed and the price of their stock plummeted. You increased your profit quite a bit in the rest of 2011, I believe. Well, I was learning how to spot those companies which were unsound. I did have some good luck there as well. But we don't only find you selling short on failing companies, Strather. We also begin to find investments in companies shortly before they announce new products or that some other company is making an offer for their stock. In fact, every single time you bought the stock of a company, it shortly thereafter has a surge in its market value. What magic process, what brilliant inspiration helped you to make these astounding selections in the stock market? I don't know. Then let me make a suggestion to you, Strather. Perhaps it was what one might call insider information. Perhaps it was information you acquired while monitoring the boardroom conversations of these corporations. Perhaps you had information which only the officials of these corporations had. Don't you think that might explain a lot of your success? But I didn't. I only monitored what I was supposed to monitor. Sure, I was on a monitoring team, but I didn't use any of that knowledge to guide my investments, really. I'm afraid the evidence goes quite against you, Strather, especially the evidence of your own computer. You see, it was watching you while you were watching those executives. It was keeping track of what you were doing and what you were seeing and hearing. Did you really think your own computer wouldn't have a modern chip, Strather? I guess I never really thought about it. You mean you didn't know how those images were being collected from those boardrooms and offices? You didn't know about the special features those chips had? Could it be that you were so greedy that you just didn't think any further than how much money you could make on the market with your insider knowledge? Yes. What are you going to do with me? That depends on whether you choose to be cooperative, Strather. I don't understand. What do you want of me? Like I said, I just want your cooperation. But what do you want me to do? I don't know what you want me to do. Strather was almost crying from stress and fear. It won't be difficult. I merely want you to share your inside information with me and invest only when I tell you it's safe. That's all? Well, not quite all, but it will be all for now. I won't even ask you for a contribution to my favorite charity. You know, Strather, you really have been unforgivably greedy. Didn't you know that such success as you've had would attract attention? Did you really think that increasing your wealth so precipitously would go unnoticed? It's lucky for you that I was the one who detected these events rather than someone else. Others might not be so tolerant of your activities. They might not be so understanding or forgiving. They might seek promotion by revealing your activities to the authorities. Yes, Strather, you have been very lucky all around. But you mustn't press your luck any more. You must never think you can deceive me, because just as you watch these business leaders, I will be watching you. I will know if you lie to me or try to hide from me your real activities. Now, Strather, we'll both do very well in this if you do exactly as I tell you. But you'll be most unhappy if you fail me. Oh, Clark, you're no fun anymore. You never want to snuggle like you used to. What's the matter with you? Nothing. I'm just fine. I feel funny, that's all. Let's go walk in the park. Again? It seems like all you want to do is walk in the park these days. Look, it's almost winter. There are no leaves on the trees. There's no flowers or birds or anything to see there. Why do you want to walk in the park? Come on, I'll tell you when we get there. Besides, maybe we can get something to eat. Have you got any ration left? Well, I'll get something and you can have half of it. Clark swept the young lady out of the apartment, and soon they were across the street wandering through the park. The park was rather dark because the city no longer bothered to try to light such areas at night. Streetlights used too much power, so they had only the glow of twilight and the light from some of the buildings nearby. The moon was only a quarter full, so it was not much help. After they were away from the street, Clark stopped and put his hand to Mindy's cheek. Darling, I'm sorry about how I've been treating you these last few months. I really do love our snuggle times, but since I got my ID done a couple of months ago, I have the feeling I'm being watched all the time. It's like there was somebody in the room with us. I can't explain it, but I get self-conscious. I hate that feeling. You're still so desirable that I could just eat you up, and I want you like crazy. I have dreams about loving you all the time. I can hardly work sometimes for thinking of you. Mindy smiled at the compliment and snuggled close to Clark, looking up at his silhouette in the deep gloom. Clark hugged her close, enjoying the contact even though they were wearing coats. We could go to a motel, Mindy suggested. No, that would be 1,000 times worse. All those mirrors attached to the walls and light fixtures, any of them could be bugs. Clark, she drew a little away, are you getting paranoid? Why would anyone want to spy on us? I don't know. It's not as if I were somebody particularly important. Sure, I work for a congressman, but he's not an important man in government anymore. He isn't a key voter on any of the bills. Usually he's one of only a handful of people voting against the bills that get passed. People still come to his office, but he isn't in on the really important meetings of the powerful people anymore. I don't think he knows any secrets that anyone would want to know. I can't explain it. What about your father? Is he important enough that they might want some information on him? Buddy? Buddy doesn't tell me anything about the business. I get more from Mama than I do from him. And she mostly tells me about the farm hands and the school she started for the hands kids. I mean, there isn't anything that's secret about anything they're doing as far as I can tell. Then what makes you think they'd be watching you? I tell you, I don't know. It's just a feeling. It's like, I don't know, maybe like when you were a kid and your parents told you that God was watching all the time. No, that isn't it. God isn't a dirty old man drooling over watching some young couple make love. It's more like in a horror movie when the music tells you that the couple making out in the convertible are about to be attacked by the monster. It's that feeling that something you can't see is watching you with evil intent. Clark, that's awful. How can you stand it? I don't stand it. I go walk in the park when it gets too bad. That's why I keep dragging you out here wearing your coat when I would rather have you inside wrapping me around you to keep warm. With that, Clark enfolded Mindy in his arms and kissed her thoroughly. Here, what are you two up to? The gruff voice of authority barked at them from behind the blinding light of a powerful flashlight. Nothing. We were just taking a walk in the park. Are you all right, miss? Of course, officer. I'm fine. He was just trying to keep me warm. Well, it would be best if you went home to get warm. There have been too many robberies in the parks now that it gets dark early. You'd better move along now. Get on home where you'll be safe. All right, we're going, Clark said, linking arms with Mindy and directing their steps toward the park exit. Home is supposed to be safe, Clark thought. It isn't supposed to feel like a trap or a prison cell. It isn't supposed to be this way. Invisible Hand, Chapter 13, Real Estate, in which Neil meets Jeeves, goes to market, meets Sam, and is turned down. Next morning, Neil was more adjusted to the time zone and didn't awaken quite so early, but he still felt that no one else was up yet, so he stayed in bed for a while, musing on what he had learned. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became that the key to the whole matter was in the payers. They were the only new element in society since he'd left that seemed to have any great power. The payers were everywhere, it appeared. They also seemed to have an in with the computer. I wonder who does the programming of the accounts computers. They'd have to know if they were being controlled. Maybe I can get a job related to those payer computers. Of course, my computer knowledge is about 15 years out of date, but there must be something I can do. With at least some vague plan for how to proceed, Neil got up and fetched in the day's rations and put them away as yesterday. Being a little later, he missed the guy who delivered them this time. He went over to the TV and looked for controls. Failing to find any and being frustrated, he muttered to himself, "How do you turn this stupid TV on, anyway?" The TV came on, and a quiet voice said, "Just ask for the program you want, sir." Neil was a little startled. Damn computer. He asked for the morning news, and there it was. The news anchor was telling about some tornadoes in the south and that local businesses felt that they had adequate supplies and labor for the moment. Then he went to a description of Chesapeake Bay and its recovery from pollution, saying that use of the bay for fishing was still inappropriate and would be for about 3 more years. The oysters were making a comeback, but would need that long to increase their numbers and get the waters moderately clean again. For some reason, that struck the newsman as important. Oh well. The third item was international news about the whaling industry. That was enough for Neil. "Where's all the good news?" Neil said quietly. Once again, the computer's calm voice said, "What kind of news would you like to see, sir? We have the following general categories." The screen showed about 30 different topics with the expected such as weather, sports, broken down into several categories, local, several categories, and business categories, but also homeschooling tips, cooking suggestions, health categories, science categories. But if you would like to give a specific topic, I could perhaps find some items of interest. Boathouse character Jeeves. That's who they model this computer on. Those sneaky... His level of respect for and fear of the people who had programmed these computers went up another notch. Jeeves, the butler valet, always sounded subservient and always seemed obedient, but also always managed to control Bertie Wooster, his so-called master. Jeeves also had a way of seeming to materialize in a room rather than walking in like other people, just like this cursed computer. And Jeeves never cracked a smile or showed any expression other than respectful attention, any more than the computer did. "How about some national news, and do you have a name?" Neil said. "A name, sir? What name would you like me to have, sir?" "What do the children call you?" "Laura still calls me Pewter. John calls me a variety of things depending on his mood, sir." "Well, I am going to call you Jeeves." "Very good, sir. Your national news, sir." Neil could swear that the computer was laughing at him, but that was probably just his imagination. The national news seemed to be largely concerned with progress reports on several large projects, such as cleaning up Chesapeake Bay, and reports on how much money was being allocated for various general areas such as public health and transportation. There was also an essay segment in which the essayist presented a case for making all bus travel a necessity rather than distinguishing local from long distance. Normally Neil would have been bored with such matters since he wasn't directly involved in any of them. He thought they sounded too much like PBS in the old days, but that line about the allocation of money was riveting to him. Whoever was allocating the money was obviously in charge. He who pays the piper calls the tune, Neil thought to himself. I need more on that. Since it's in the news, there could only be a little suspicion if I asked for more news about that. How about more news on the money allocated for projects and things, Jeeves? Very good, sir. This time the items were more systematically presented, going from the largest allocations and working their way downward. For some reason, Neil got the idea that the computer was doing a civics lesson just for him, since the dates on some of the items were over a month old. From time to time, he asked for more detail on some item, and it was quickly provided. The items presented were in a variety of formats and had different people doing the voiceover. Most were professional, but a couple seemed almost amateurish. Neil decided to ask about allocations for necessities for the local apartment building, but the closest he could come was for the neighborhood. By then, the rest of the family began to make noises like they were getting up, so Neil said, "That will be all, Jeeves." "Very good, sir." The computer is getting even worse. Now it's even beginning to sound like it has an English accent. So someone was setting a budget of considerable proportions for the entire country. Whoever was setting that budget was in charge. Such a budget implied, no, positively shouted a controlled economy. It was centralized planning and no doubt about it. Childhood memories of the fall of Russian communism and the Cold War were brought to mind. It was all of a piece with computers taking the place of neighborhood spies, monitoring everyone's behavior to a degree that even the most ardent Stalinist would have envied. They weren't even trying to hide it. Neil could almost feel the walls closing in on him. Even looking at the TV screen made him want to shudder. He looked out of the window and saw other apartment buildings. More of the masses trapped in mindless dependence. He had to get out of here. Brianna would never come with him under the circumstances. She and Tony were completely unaware of their cage. Well, perhaps Tony was aware, but it was clear that Brianna was not. Tony might be part of the problem, but Neil no longer thought that he was likely part of the controlling organization. No, that organization was too big and too much in power to need to hide subversives among the residents of lower-class apartments, especially when the computer could do the spying for them so much more easily and thoroughly. "Brianna, I was thinking that I'd imposed on you enough for one visit. I was thinking of getting an apartment of my own so I can start getting settled in somewhere rather than making your place my hotel." "Dad, so soon?" Brianna sounded as if she were actually surprised and disappointed. He would have thought his condemnation of her homeschooling would have made her want him out of the apartment. It was certainly making him uncomfortable. It would, for example, be very hard to sit quietly and watch her conduct classes for her children. Neil was sure he needed to go, and the sooner the better. He could visit her on weekends when the lack of schooling wouldn't be so blatant. "Dear, I've been without my own place for almost 20 years. I really want some place I can call my own." As Tony entered, Brianna turned to him and said, "Dad's leaving already. He's only been here for a couple of days, and he's going again." "I hope it wasn't anything we did or said, sir." "Oh, no, Tony," Neil quickly responded. "It's me, not you. I feel a need to have a place of my own. I've been without a place I could call my own for over 15 years. It isn't as if I were going to move across the country or anything. I expect to get something not so far away, but just not right here on top of you." "Well, sir, I want you to know you're welcome to come back at any time. You're family, sir. You don't even need to warn us you're coming over. Just drop in on us." "Do you have a place in mind, Dad?" "No, I thought I'd go to the housing office and see what was available." "If you tell Rose what kind of place you need and where, she can probably tell you which office to try first. She's very good at that sort of thing," Brianna said. "Yes," Tony said, "since they all have the same listings available, it doesn't really matter which housing office you go to as far as seeing what's available. You choose a housing office on the basis of how good they are at finding a good match for you personally." "Okay, I'll be happy to talk to Rose again. How do I get in touch with her?" "She told you yesterday, don't you remember? Hers is the apartment just to the left as you enter the foyer. Of course, I guess that's to your right as you get off the elevator. Just tell the computer there that you'd like to see Rose when she has a minute." "If you need to see Rose, any TV in the building could tell her if she's near one, but we think it more polite to only ask to see her in a professional capacity from the lobby TV. If I wanted her to visit her as a friend, I could use a TV here in the apartment. We could even chat over the TVs if we wanted. I told our TV that since you were visiting, we wouldn't be entertaining, and it's passed on the word whenever anyone asked to talk. Of course, if it were an emergency or something of that sort, it would tell me." "Are the TVs linked to the web?" "Of course. Why cut yourself off from the world?" Brianna said. "Well, there might be reasons," Neil said, feeling he had revealed too much by his question. So just shut down the TV. Then it'll ignore everything short of a fire or something until you use the password, Tony said. Neil didn't believe for a minute that the computer and the TV would really stop listening and recording everything. If it could hear the password, it could hear everything. Brianna and Tony were living in a fool's paradise. By this time, Neil had finished his breakfast, and it sounded like the kids were up, so he went down to see about having a talk with Rose. As it turned out, Rose was already in the lobby talking with the delivery man about a new family that would be moving in. Neil sat in a chair, one that did not face the TV, and waited patiently for Rose's attention. "Good morning, honey. May I help you?" Rose was obviously a morning person. "I need to get a place of my own to live. Brianna said I should start my search by talking to you." "What kind of place do you want? Do you want something near Brianna? We do have an opening on the 6th floor. "I was thinking of getting someplace peaceful, more away from the city, someplace I can rest and maybe get some small job." "What kind of work?" "I hadn't really thought much about it. I've been out of the job market for almost 20 years, so I'll probably have to start out with something simple." "I think I know just the person for you then. Sam Witherspoon. He's a housing agent. His place is, well, just tell the driver you want to go to Sam Witherspoon's employment. He'll know how to get you there. Take the westbound bus." "This is a free service, right?" Neil said. "Sure. Finding a place to live is no luxury. Why use money for that?" "Good," Neil said, "and many thanks. You've been quite helpful." "My pleasure, I assure you," said Rose with a big smile. Neil, figuring there was no time like the present, left the apartment building and crossed the street to the westbound bus stop. Meanwhile, back in the apartment, Brianna was clearly distressed. "I'm sure he's leaving because he thinks the kids should be in school." "Darling, I've been thinking about this, and I believe him when he says he just wants a place of his own. I think he gets upset about our homeschooling because it feels like a rejection of his whole career," Tony said, taking her in his arms. "You have to remember that he had given his life to helping other nations set up school systems. He comes home and finds that you and half the other mothers in the country are keeping their kids home from school. It's like they were saying that he'd been hurting all those children in those nations he helped. Naturally, it made him rather emotional." "But we didn't reject him. There are lots of reasons for kids to attend school. It's just that homeschooling is better for most families these days," Brianna said, nestling against Tony's chest. "When he visits, we'll just have to reassure him that what he did was really worthwhile and needed. I think that will keep him calm when the kids' education comes up." "I sure hope you're right, because I will not give up teaching them myself." After about 10 miles of riding the bus and 2 transfers, the bus driver had asked his computer about Sam's place, and it told him the route Neil should take. Neil was dropped off in a residential street in what looked, for all the world, like a small town. There was a grain elevator near the railroad station, and the single business district was only about 4 blocks long. The address Neil had been given was for a single-family dwelling with a cardboard sign on the porch proudly proclaiming Sam Witherspoon's employment. Neil didn't know whether to take the sign as an announcement that Sam had a job or as the advertisement of a business, but the address matched what he'd been given, so he went up on the porch and knocked on the door. A black man of about 70, who looked like he'd been farming for most of those years, opened the door. Come in. I'm Sam Witherspoon. You must be Neil Campbell. Rose told me to expect you. Have a seat. Just push that cat off the sofa if you'd rather sit there. Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? Juice?" One would have thought Neil was a neighbor who had just dropped in for a chat. "Coffee will be fine." Neil managed to get in. Sam stepped into the next room, which appeared to be a small kitchen with a short refrigerator, small stove, and a single sink. "Cream or sugar?" Sam asked. "No, I like it black." Sam did something at the counter and came back in a couple of minutes with 2 steaming mugs and offered Neil one. "Just put it anywhere there on that table. It cleans up real easy." Sam sat in an easy chair, sighed, and put his feet up on a hassock. "You in any kind of a hurry, friend?" Sam said as he leaned his head back on the chair and almost closed his eyes. "No particular hurry, but I would like to have something to move into today if possible. You see, I feel a little awkward imposing on my daughter. She says I'm not a burden, but you know how women are. They say that, but they don't really mean it." "So what kind of life do you lead, friend? Are you one who likes to be up and doing first thing, or do you like to let life come at you a little slower than that? You got something that's pushing you, or are you content to let the world drift by?" "Neither, actually. I just want some place comfortable that I can call my own for a while. I also need to get a job of some kind. I'm kind of at loose ends on that. Maybe something involving computers?" Sam's eyebrows went up at that, but his voice continued to be calm, and his questions seemed to ignore it. "You like neighbors close by or down the road a piece?" "I guess I'd like a few close by, but not very many. Does that make sense?" "Friend, I think what you want is what we got plenty of. There are several small houses vacant in the area and some duplexes. Is duplex a little too close for you? Sam was working his way lower and lower into his chair, and his eyes were definitely closed now. I think a small house would be best. What would it cost me? Let's see, just the one person, might use a room for work, no car. I think I should be able to put you onto something for about $15 to $20 a month. Of course, that's assuming you want to rent rather than buy. Neil didn't even need to think about that one. He was pretty sure he wouldn't be here more than a couple of months. Renting would be just fine. These houses are very far from the bus line? Well, some are and some aren't. I'll show you the ones closer to the bus line first. If none of those suit, we can try some further out. Sounds good to me, Neil said. The cat jumped into Sam's lap, causing Sam to jerk and almost spill what little was left of his coffee. Cat says it's time for us to get going and leave him alone to sleep, Sam said, pulling himself up out of the chair with apparent reluctance. The cat, having displaced Sam, converted itself into a furry donut and closed its eyes. Car's out this way, Sam said, and took Neil out the back to a detached garage. The car was at least 20 years old, but was obviously something Sam took some pride in. It was clean and shiny and looked in perfect condition. As they got in, Sam said, Car belongs to my grandson, actually, but he lets me drive it some when I got a client. The car started readily and ran quietly. They went through much of what there was of the town and stopped at a small, neat house with several well-kept flower beds and well-tended shrubs. Sam said, Don't know if we can get you this one. The widow Larkin expects whoever lives here to tend the plants. The place sometimes is vacant for several months at a time, but it's the best-looking place on the list, so I like to show it first. Neil didn't even get out of the car. I wouldn't want to be responsible for those flowers. I think I have a brown thumb. If they were to die, I'd feel terrible, and the widow would just get mad at me. Yeah, I know how you feel. The next one is just a couple of blocks over. Sam maneuvered the car easily on the nearly traffic-free streets. The next house needed some yard work, but looked to be in good repair. Sam showed Neil over the house, and Neil thought that it would do just fine. He didn't mind wielding a lawnmower from time to time. The furnishings must be what people call standard, because they all had that sturdy look with rounded corners, but he never paid much attention to furniture so long as it was comfortable, and the chairs sat pretty good. Neil said that this one would do fine, so Sam took him several blocks over to the home of the owner. In the yard was a small, slender man with a sharp face and jogging shoes that didn't go with his suit at all. Sam and Neil approached, and Sam said, Morning, Will. Morning, Sam. Got a gentleman here who kind of likes your house over on Putnam Street. That's a $25 house for a single, ain't it? Depends on how he uses the spare room. What you aim to do with it, mister? Neil said, Well, I don't quite know just yet. I haven't settled on a job, so I don't know whether I'd need it for work or not. What kind of work is your line? Will's look got a little sharper, and his smile had faded almost completely away. I haven't had a chance to really settle on a line. I've been out of the country for a few years, and my old line doesn't seem to be of much use anymore. How long you been away, mister? Will asked. Going on about 17 years, I guess. Where you been for 17 years? The tone of the questions was no longer friendly, but was getting definitely suspicious. The Middle East, back in the mountains. I was doing some work for the government. Theirs or ours? Both, actually. Our government wanted me to do some work helping their government. Neil was getting rather uncomfortable and a little peeved. I don't really think you like my house much, mister. I think you better look elsewhere, Will said with decision. Wait, it's really a nice house. I think I could like it quite well. How about $40 a month, Neil said. You can make it $1,000 a month for all I care. I still won't let you stay in any house of mine. Sam, get him out of here. With that, Will turned and walked back into his house. Invisible Hand, Chapter 14, Countdown, in which tensions rise as the day of transition nears. Wednesday, November 7th, 2012. Congratulations, Mr. President. You have won a resounding victory. I think it shows the good sense of the American people in this time of crisis. Thanks. I really don't think the nation could have survived if we'd lost. I know I owe a lot of the credit to you and your efforts behind the scenes. We just did what was necessary, sir. You might have won even without our pressure on the media. I mean, there were a lot of the news guys and editorialists who would have supported you anyway. And I remember that we didn't even have to use the fake vote counts we had ready. I really think you would have had a good chance. The American people understand that you're doing what's best for them. They want a strong leader in this time of crisis. Well, I certainly hope that next time there won't be a need for such steps, but it was very reassuring to know that one way or another we were going to win this election. December 27th, 2012, near the Mexican border. I tell you, they're coming across the border as soon as we switch over to the new money. And you have this on the authority of your maid? It's all over the neighborhood. Everybody knows about it. It's just that lots of people are closing their eyes to it. Look, ma'am, we expect some troubles at the transition. We'd be fools not to. This new money isn't going to be understood by lots of people, especially people who haven't been reading the newspapers on this side of the border. But that doesn't mean they'll come over with guns to steal everything they can get their hands on. Don't you understand? All those predictions of chaos and lawlessness by the opponents convinced a lot of people. Maybe it's just wishful thinking on their part, but they believe it nonetheless. When the chaos starts, they want to get theirs, and if there's a rush across the border and if some stores get looted, they'll just think they have to get in on it before all the good stuff is gone. Ma'am, you're just hearing rumors about kids' gangs. We'll be right on top of it. You just stay home if you're worried about things and keep your doors locked and you'll be fine, believe me. Oh, I'll stay home all right with my guns loaded. If they try to get into my place, they'll wish they hadn't. Ma'am, please be very sure before you shoot. You could kill or wound some innocent person who just happens to be walking by. I'll be sure, and I'll videotape everything so you'll be sure too. December 30th, 2012, Deming, Mexico. Daddy, how long will we be in the mountains? We'll be there for a while, sweetheart. Several weeks at least. Will we have Christmas there? Yes, next year we'll have Santa and a tree and everything. We'll even have snow. You'll like that, won't you? Can we build a snowman, Daddy? I think we'll have time for that. Now, you get together all the toys you want to be sure and bring and line them up on the couch here in the living room. Fred, are you sure it's safe to travel with all that kerosene? It'll be in the trailer, so even if we have a wreck, it'll be quite a ways away from us. Besides, those are plastic containers, so they probably won't break. And anyway, I spent too much money on that stuff to leave it here for the looters. Don't we have enough wood at the cabin to get by? We don't know how long we'll have to be there. You know what the mayor says. It'll be at least months and maybe years before it's safe to come back here. And when we do come back, everything is likely to be destroyed. I'm afraid this is God's judgment on America for its sinful ways. Praise the Lord. At least we have a place of refuge to go to. I feel guilty sometimes about not being able to take the others. Doreen, I've gone over this with you time and again. There isn't going to be enough food in the valley to support everybody in the church. If we have to stay there for more than 6 months or so, we'll have to be getting by on what we can grow and hunt. If it takes more than a couple of years, we'll have to be making our own clothes from skins and fibers we've grown ourselves. There just isn't enough good farmland in the valley to support 300 or more people. We'd be forced to expel some people or starve. I know, but I still feel terrible about leaving the others behind. Some of them are our friends, like the Olsons. He'd never come with us, Doreen. You know he thinks this new money is great. He thinks it's actually going to bring about heaven on earth, the idiot. But I still feel sorry for Rose and the kids. They don't deserve to be caught up in the chaos and rioting and looting. They don't deserve that. Darling, that's one of the millions of reasons I'm so glad you're Mrs. Bascom. You have such a tender heart. Here, let me kiss those tears away. You'll see. The Lord will protect the righteous. Somehow he'll take care of them. Daddy, can we take Poochie this time? Sure, darling. A dog like Poochie is just what we'll need in the mountains. I'll go get him. And she scampered from the room. Dear, if we can't feed ourselves very well, how are we going to feed a dog? We can't. But I don't want to leave him here in a kennel to starve to death with no chance at all. I love that little guy. We'll let him loose out in the country somewhere near a river or a creek, anyway, so he'll have a chance to find food. He'll take care of himself. It's not like he was some lapdog who's completely dependent on people. He's a mutt. They're good at survival. Here's Poochie, and I have all my toys in the living room. Oh, and Fred, I found some more survival books and how-to-do-it books at the bookstore yesterday. They were a little expensive, but I didn't think that would matter with what's coming. Right you are. That's my little frontier wife. You're both tough and smart. Give me a kiss and let's get finished with the packing. December 30th, 2012, Fort Hood, Texas. Sir, we have reports coming in from all along the border about plans to invade. You're not talking about the Mexican army, are you? Oh, no, sir, but people in police departments from Brownsville to Tijuana are reporting rumors of gangs and even just ordinary people expecting to come over the border after the transition to loot and steal and who knows what else. Yes, but we've got a week or so to get ready for them. And it's not as if the Homeland Security folks haven't given us tools to use. As I see it, we should be able to patrol most of the desert border with drone planes. So long as the threat is out in the desert, we don't need to do much about it right away. It's the towns that are on both sides of the border, like Tijuana and Juarez and Nuevo Laredo, especially where the town on the Mexican side is quite a bit larger than the town on the U.S. side. If something gets started in one of those places, we could have some serious problems. We've scheduled a mobilization of the Guard for all the major crossing points, but if enough people just start swimming the river in Texas or California or just crossing in the desert, they can still just overwhelm us. We can't move the regular Army units to the border without causing an international incident. It wouldn't look friendly, especially since Mexico is threatening to stop sending us oil if we go through with the transition. Are we really going to use the Minutemen? That sounds risky to me. Those guys are likely to start shooting at anything that moves. You don't think they would stay home like good little citizens with the rumors that have been going around, do you? We have a lot better chance of controlling them if we include them and have men with them to keep an eye on them. Besides, they do give us a lot more bodies to use, and if we have them in some kind of uniform, we won't be so likely to shoot them by mistake. Yes, General, but I'm still nervous about it. Son, we'll be here at headquarters ready to take all the blame if something goes wrong. It's just my reputation on the line, not yours. You just relax and do your job as well as you can, and we'll do fine. Yes, sir. December 30th, 2012, near a border crossing in Laredo, Texas. We've had cameras at these border crossings for years. Why are we putting up more now? I don't know, but it looks to me like these we are putting up are pretty obvious. They're even on poles, for goodness sake. The regular ones are hidden, or at least not right out in the open. You'll notice that these are the older, bulky kind rather than the fingertip-size cameras. Yeah, now that you mention it, I guess these are for the mobs to see and destroy and think they're not being filmed anymore while the hidden ones keep on recording. Okay, I feel better about this job now. Weren't you feeling okay about it before? I just figured this was another of those make-work details to keep us busy. I hate wasting my time when trouble's coming and you can almost smell it in the air. Oh, that's just lunch being cooked at the cantina across the border. Idiot! December 30th, 2012, El Paso, Texas. Okay, Your Honor, here's how we have things set up. The National Guard and the Border Patrol will concentrate their efforts along the border itself to minimize the number of people who cross in the event that there are crowds. This way we can concentrate our efforts at what we expect to be the flashpoints. And what do you expect to be the flashpoints? For general crowds, we expect the malls and shopping centers, but more specifically, food stores and places like Walmart where there's lots of cheap merchandise that people expect to be free. We figure that the local citizens are likely to be a problem at some of those places, even without any border crossers. I take it you have some other places in mind as well? Yes, sir. We think places like jewelry stores and the oil storage depot and the banks. If the crowds are bad at the consumer goods places, we figure the hardened criminal types are likely to try for a big score in all the chaos. Therefore, we have some SWAT teams ready to go. We also have asked the state police for help with covering some of those places. And we have asked the National Guard to cover the oil depot and the warehouse district in the industrial park. So what's left that could be a problem? That depends on the terrorists, Your Honor. The terrorists? Yes, sir. We think this would be an ideal time for the terrorists to hit. They've been accusing us of going to the new money to avoid paying the Islamic States what we owe them for oil and reparations for war damage. It would be easy for them to come in with a flood of rioters and pick some target that would cause a lot of damage. Worse, they might try to get a firefight started in a crowd of unarmed civilians and kill scores of them. That would be a major political black eye for the U.S. and the rest of the world, especially in Latin America. What can we do about it? That's where the Homeland Security guys come in, sir. We've asked for their help, and they're bringing in some resources. I'm not sure what all, but they've asked for some office space, so we got them 2 floors of the Hotchkiss building. Lord knows they don't have enough renters anyway, and the HS guys don't need luxury accommodations. Anyway, they say they'll be on top of the terrorist threat. I've warned our boys of what to look out for and have been emphasizing self-control. Beyond that, we just have to keep our fingers crossed. Is there any threat to the residential neighborhoods? Only the poor ones near downtown. I don't think any large gangs will get through, and they are the only ones with cars who would go after the wealthy houses when there are stores nearby with lots of merchandise a mob would want. 8:30 a.m., Monday, December 31st, 2012, Washington, D.C. Are you absolutely sure you have everything in place for the transition? Yes, sir, I think we do. I'm not asking what you think. I'm asking what you know. This change is even bigger and more important than the old Y2K thing back at the turn of the century. We have to do it right the first time. Do you have everything in place, and are you certain? Yes, sir. We have everything in place, and we're as certain as we can be. We've run tests on everything we could think of, but this is programming, sir. There's no way we can tell if we got everything. It's just too complicated. That's why we're going to have to watch things and have emergency code to use to back out the changes and install patches for the bugs we find, and so forth. But you're all set, right? As set as it's humanly possible to be. We'll be able to monitor everything from here in this center, and we should be undetectable to all the local centers. We can make changes to their code and cover our tracks. We have backdoors into their systems that let us become root in case we need to. In other words, we can control exactly what's happening on every computer and what is put in every database in the whole system. They can't even twitch without us knowing. And if we don't like something, we can just change it so we do like it. Excellent. Now, you also have backups of the situation into moment of transition, so we can go back to that quickly. Yes, sir, we do. We'll be taking a complete database snapshot on every system and making multiple copies at several sites. We should be able to return to the situation as of December 31st, 2012, within a day of your giving the order. We have all the bank data and market data, and it will be copied into backups on New Year's Day, when all the markets and banks are closed anyway. I'll be here Tuesday, and I expect things to go smoothly. If it doesn't, I'll have your hide and the hide of everybody who works for you. Be sure they know that. Understand? Yes, sir. We always work under that assumption. I'll see you in the morning. By the time you get here, New Year's Day, we should know how things are going. Good night, sir. 1:30 p.m., Monday, December 31st, 2012, New York City. Careful there, you're spilling it. Well, give me a hand. It's hard to carry 3 drinks and 2 plates at once. Oh, Sally, are you sure you don't want any of that walnut cake? Yes, I'm sure. All the weight I put on goes to the wrong places. They look pretty right to me. Ted, you rascal, you. I never heard you say anything like that before. Sally's liable to pop you one if you talk like that. Now that she doesn't work for me anymore, I don't have to watch what I say so much. Hey, the day isn't over yet. She still works for you for, let's see, 3 hours, 22 minutes, Johnny. Are you sure you know how to subtract? Sally laughed at him. Well, I'm an accountant, not a secretary. My computer does all my adding and subtracting for me. You were an accountant. What are you going to do next year when there aren't any jobs for accountants? Ted asked. You know, I've done a little painting as a hobby, so I thought I'd try doing that for a while, just until this silliness with the 10 points blows over. It probably won't last more than a couple of months anyway. By then I'll probably be sick of painting, and it'll feel good to get back to accounting again. I look on this as a paid vacation. Sally cocked an eye at John and said, What does your wife think about having you home all day every day? She says she can use some help with the kids. What are you going to do with your time? I can't see the bank needing Ted as a loan officer when there won't be any loans anymore, so he certainly won't need a secretary. I don't see secretaries as being useless with this new economy. There still needs to be somebody who understands where everything is and how everything works. If I could keep Ted on the ball, I'm sure I could do the same for almost anyone, she laughed. So, Ted, you're the only one who hasn't told us his plans. What are you going to do? John said, turning to Ted. First, I'm going to finish this cake, and then I'll think about it. I really have no idea what I can do. I trained in business and worked hard to get where I am. Now this new money sort of ruins all my plans and ambitions. Everything I learned seems to be worthless now. Maybe I'll just become a bum on the street living off the dole. Sally, her face showing a mixture of concern and surprise, said, But Ted, you're a smart guy with a lot on the ball. I've seen you arrange deals that I didn't think were possible. You've made millions for this bank and saved more millions for its investors. Why don't you think you can do as well now? What is there for me to do? Nobody's going to come to me to ask for money because I can't give them any. There isn't any bank anymore for all practical purposes. Oh, there's the vault where people want to store precious things like papers and jewels and keepsakes. But you don't need the top 18 floors of this building for that. All these offices will be just empty next year, and all the folks who are using them will be sitting on their hands doing nothing. Johnny, you think this new money thing will only last a couple of months, and I sure hope you're right, because it's a disaster for me. How is it a disaster, Ted? Well, there's my house, for one thing. I have a pretty big mortgage on it, and I can't make the payments with no job, now can I? There's my daughter's horse and my son's basketball camps, all needing to be paid for. My job as a loan officer gave us comfort and security. Now all we'll have is memories and regrets. Ted's bitterness was almost palpable, his voice angry and his complexion becoming mottled. Tomorrow, Ted continued, we keep the computers running one last day to let the Fed make sure we haven't been cheating anybody, and that's it. I probably won't get paid anything for that since I'm not one of the IT guys. I'm sure they don't mind all this computer money stuff because they can still get paid for keeping their computers running. But for guys like you and me, Johnny, until the new money thing goes away, we've got nothing. But Ted, what about your wife? Doesn't she have a job at a hospital? Won't she be okay? Sally asked. My wife's job is in the billing department. There won't be any billing department starting tomorrow. She's out on the street as far as they're concerned. The whole thing stinks. I can see that 2013 is going to be real lucky for me. Ted threw his dirty plate and cup into the trash and said, I'm going home. This place makes me sick now, and walked out. 9 p.m., Monday, December 31st, 2012. Dear, this is the last night. Tomorrow I go to the drugstore to get your prescription filled. You won't have to put up with the pain any longer. But tomorrow is a holiday. Will they be open? There's money to be made if they're open. I think they will be. Won't there be a lot of other people there? At your age, I don't think you can wait in line more than half an hour or so. I'll do what I have to, darling. Don't you worry. 9:45 p.m., Monday, December 31st, 2012. Quiet now. Please give me your attention. All right, just listen up now. Thank you. Now, tomorrow's the big day. Tomorrow you and millions of others like you begin your first day as the first payers in the world. You'll be breaking new ground. You will be leaders. You will establish traditions that will live after you. Everything depends on you. There, she chuckled. I thought that would sober you up. What I just said is true, but so long as you take your duties seriously and do what you think is fair, you can't go far wrong. We will all be learning. You will learn your job and how to make our new money a success. There are a million ways you can go wrong, but there's only one way you can succeed. That way is to be as fair as you can be. Don't pay less than a person deserves, and don't pay more than a person deserves. As soon as you appear unfair, you will lose any respect you might otherwise have gotten, even the respect of those you pay too much. Not everybody is going to love you for what you do. Some are going to be quite angry with you. Your only defense is to pay fairly. This is also your last chance to change your mind about becoming a payer. You can quit now with no penalty. You can also quit tomorrow, so long as you do so before you pay anyone at all. But after that first payment, that's it. Okay, you each have your assignments. Remember that you aren't limited to paying just for your assigned area. If you see someone doing something for someone else, you can pay them, even if it's not your area. You have all been checked out on your contact phones. If you lose your phone, please report it right away. No one but you can use that phone, but we don't want to have to replace them. Your phone should be able to identify anyone you meet if you ask it, and it has a chance to hear them talk and they touch the fingerprint pad. Or they touch the fingerprint pad. Now, go to your homes and get a good night's sleep. Those of you who don't go on duty at midnight, best of luck to you all. Take good care of us. Invisible Hand, Chapter 15, Reputation, in which Neil reveals something in order to rent a house, insults Sam, and explores his own guilt. Sam turned to Niall and said, Don't worry, there's several more places. Will is just a little more particular than most. They walked back to the car. Why didn't he want me to rent the house? Neil asked as they got in. Sam looked down at his hands on the steering wheel and said quietly, You don't work, so you might be a slacker. You've been out of the country for a long time, so you might be one of those people who want the palm back. Finally, we came in my car and not yours, so he has no evidence that you're likely to earn money. In short, you have no reputation, and what he knows about you isn't promising. Sam kind of looked at Neil out of the corner of his eye as he gave the last of these several defects. First things first, Neil said, holding up one finger. What's a slacker? A slacker is somebody who doesn't do anything worthwhile, someone who wants to just live on standard without working. They don't usually keep up the places where they live, and they leave when the smell gets too bad for them. Nobody respects a slacker, and I've known them to be refused food in a lot of places. I'm no slacker. I've always worked since I became a man, and I intend to keep on working. Neil was letting a little of his anger show. I never doubted your friend. Rose wouldn't send me a slacker. Okay, so what's with this palm business? Neil asked, holding up a second finger. Palm is short for physical object money. You know, like currency, bills, and coins. What does that have to do with me renting this house? That requires a little background. Back at the transition, there were some people who were scared half to death at the idea of going over to the accounts. Some of them got pretty violent. Others left the country. But the worst ones were the ones who thought that without currency everything would just fall into anarchy and they could just grab what they wanted by force. When the government over in D.C. started to fall apart, some gangs came out to the suburbs to loot. The police here stopped them cold. A bunch of us got together to help, too. Them as we didn't kill, we let the computer identify real good. It took their eye image, fingerprints, even their smell. They were given a choice of working off a hefty fine or leaving the country. Most of them left in the end, I guess. Never gave us no more trouble anyway. So then the police and those of us who helped each got a pretty nice payment. That's what I used to buy my house. Those guys were palmers. They were expecting to steal our stuff and sell it for currency. Besides, we also get news way out here, and we see what's happening in those other countries in Europe. They done let their computers get way out of hand. They can't turn around over there without they get the government's permission. I'll be damned if I could live like that. Those folks up in Canada wised up and came in with us after a few years, but Mexico, they still use palms. Of course, they don't have the computers like Europe and Japan, but they still use palms. You can't trust people who use palms. They can't even trust each other. It's them palms what does it to them. Palms will do it to anybody. So we don't want nothing to do with those palm folks. Let the ITs deal with them. They know how to handle them. Okay, Sam, I get the picture. Palms are most definitely out. Neil thought Sam was a little crazy, but he seemed to know his real estate. Now, the last thing, Neil said, holding up the third finger, is my reputation. What's this about me not having a reputation? Well, now, friend, I gave you every chance back at the house to let me see your background, but you didn't say a thing about it. You even seemed to avoid looking at the TV. I ain't one to pry when a man doesn't want things known about him. It don't seem friendly. But you're asking a lot of a body when you ask to live in their house on their property and not let them know your background, Sam finished soberly. I didn't know about any of this. How do I let you know my background? Neil was somewhat taken aback. He was used to people thinking well of him. He almost took the respect of others for granted. Sam's body relaxed a bit, and he smiled at Neil, saying, We can use my TV if you like. You just tell the computer that it's okay for it to tell me about you, and I check a few things, and then I can recommend you. You mean that I have to let you know everything about me? Neil wasn't sure he liked that idea. Oh, no, just some of your work history, if you have one, and any declarations about your previous living places. We call it a housing reputation. Of course, if you have a record with the police, that'll be in there, and any positive or negative general declarations from folks who know you. My God, you practically want my life history. You also want the name of all the girls I dated when I was in high school? Neil was about ready to just walk away, but Sam was still driving the car. Mister, calm down. This is ordinary stuff. You do know what a declaration is, don't you? I thought I did, but it sounds like maybe I don't. Perhaps you'd better tell me. A declaration is a statement given to the accounts computer regarding something particularly good or bad about someone. The guy making the declaration must identify himself, and any facts in the declaration must be verified or they're dropped. You can turn in a declaration that relates to anything about anybody. But if you lie or say only bad things in your declarations, you get a reputation for that, since the declarations are part of your reputation as well as the reputation of the guy you're saying things about. Most people don't do many declarations, but if, say, you let somebody use your property and they improve it, or if a slacker leaves your house a mess, then you're obligated to put in a declaration on them. If you don't, you're not warning the next owner about the slacker. You mean it's against the law not to put in a declaration in that case? Neil asked. Oh, no. You can ignore it if you want to, but then the guy whom you didn't warn is likely to put in a declaration against you. Silence about a slacker or someone who doesn't deal honestly is a kind of a lie, it seems to me. It's like you become their accomplice. It's like not warning somebody when the bridge is out. You can do that sort of thing, but when people find out they aren't going to trust you anymore either. What if there's something in my medical history or something about my family I don't want you to find out about? Oh, your medical history is nobody else's business unless you're insane. I've never seen anything medical in a background. Your family is not you. A background only tells about you and what you've done. Your mother could be a serial killer, and that wouldn't appear in your background. But you do get statements from my old bosses and things. Not unless they put in a declaration. Your work history is what you've been paid for and how much. That gives a guy a real good idea of what kind of person you are. So really, I guess it's more recommendations from all of your payers. Why should anyone care whether your boss liked you or not? You're being considered for a house, not as somebody to work with. By this time, they'd gotten back to Sam's place. Sam took Neil into the living room office and said, Hal, Neil here wants to have a recommendation. The TV came on with a view of the computer from 2001, A Space Odyssey, and said in Hal's voice from the movie, Are you Neil Campbell? Neil said, I am Neil D. Campbell. Do you wish to give housing background information to Sam Witherspoon, who stands before you? May I see the information you would make available to Sam before I decide? Of course, Mr. Campbell. Sam, if you will leave the room. Sam said with a grin, It'll be fine, friend. You'll see. Then he went into the back of the house and made noises in the kitchen. As soon as Sam left, the TV screen showed a list of topics. Work history and account total, of course, jumped out at Neil. But there was also a list of places where Neil had lived. One, his daughter's place. A special needs topic which showed none, and under declarations he saw there were 3, all from people at the embassy from which he had worked. They were people whose names he didn't recognize, but he assumed that they must have been payers. He asked to see the declarations and found that they referred to specific incidents in his service. Fortunately, they all reflected credit on Neil and did seem to match Neil's memory of the events concerned. He saw nothing from his private life at all. Everything mentioned concerned things he had done in public, except the amount of money he had. Neil had always thought of himself as being a pretty modern 21st century kind of guy. He'd lived in several cultures that were quite different from that in which he grew up, but telling people how much money he had just felt wrong. He felt exposed. What business was it of anyone else? "Do you have to show the account total?" Neil asked Hal. "The total is quite respectable, sir, especially considering that you've been out of the country for some time." The voice was that of Jeeves. "I don't believe that anyone could take it amiss." Neil almost had a heart attack. "Jeeves, is that you?" "Why, of course, sir. Were you expecting someone else, sir?" "I was expecting Sam's computer, Hal." "But, sir, I'm serving you now. It would be unseemly for Hal to serve you without your permission." The computer seemed almost smug, and he was sure that if it had been a person it would have been aloof and superior in expression. Damn, Neil thought. What the hell is this computer doing? It's like a science fiction horror story. Neil had a cold, hollow feeling in the pit of his stomach, and his skin prickled quietly. Like that time? No time for that now. How can I get away from the computer? Is it everywhere? Does everyone let their account total be shown? Don't they want to keep that private? Neil asked. Well, sir, it's been my experience that those who want it hidden are ashamed of its being a low total, or zero, or worse, frozen. For the last 10 years or so, those with high totals have wanted them known and seek opportunities to have them displayed. I think it would be unseemly for one in your position to hide an impressive total. So you think it would be best for me to... Damn, now I'm asking the advice of a machine. What's wrong with me? Let it all hang out, sir? Yes, sir. Neil took a deep breath and said, Okay, you may tell Sam my background. Very good, sir. I will make available to Sam your background for purposes of housing. Will that be all, sir? Yes, that will be all. Neil was still a little in shock, so he sat down rather abruptly. Okay, Sam, you can come back now, Hal said in a rather penetrating voice. The noise in the kitchen stopped abruptly, and Sam sauntered back into the room. Neil, it seems to me that maybe I was forgetting that you don't know our ways. Would you like to watch while I look over your background? You can tell me which things you'd rather I didn't see. Sam, that's very kind of you. I believe that would make me feel better. You know, I was probably a lot like you about letting near strangers know about me back when I was your age before the transition. I remember being mad when I kept getting ads in the mail from people that shouldn't have known my address. It's been so long that I forget these days what it was like back then. You had to figure that every stranger was out to get your money however they could. It was a dog-eat-dog world for everybody back then. Oh yeah, Hal, you got the menu ready? Things are in order, Sam. Shall I start with the usual items? Just the headers first, Hal. Don't show the contents until I tell you to. The first thing up was the housing history. Since Neil had only spent 2 nights in Brianna's apartment, Neil figured there would be no problem there, so he nodded a yes to Sam's raised eyebrow. Housing, Hal. The housing menu showed just the one location and 2 days' duration. It had a no defects under damages and quiet under disturbances. Under attitude it had friendly. Neil, work history? Sam raised his eyebrow again. Okay. This time there was a lot more. The history was all for his time in the Middle East. There was nothing before the transition. It seems that there actually had been payers at the embassy, since there were payments recorded on several occasions, including one during the last week. Each payment was matched by a description of some benefit which was a result of something Neil had done. Most of the payments mentioned information Neil had given about local conditions and local politics and how the information had helped some trade or other, or had made things safer for Americans in the area. Each of the 3 declarations Neil had seen earlier were matched by 3 of the larger payments. Sam seemed to just glance over the material, but when he looked at Neil to inquire about seeing the next item, he pursed his lips in a whistle. The next item was the 3 declarations, which Sam spent quite a bit of time over. Finally, Sam looked at Neil and said, There's no need for me to see your account total if you'd rather I didn't know. The rest of what's in here is plenty. No, if I'm going to live in this country, it looks like I'm going to have to get used to everybody knowing what I'm worth, Neil said with some trepidation. Okay, Hal, let's see the total. The $84,503.28 total was shown again, just as it had been at the airport. Neil felt like he was taking his first trip to a nude beach, but Sam was so casual about it that Neil didn't think he actually blushed. Okay, Neil, let's hit the road. I think you're going to like this next one. Sam seemed quite cheerful now. The next house was within sight of a bus stop, and Neil could see the downtown business district was only a couple of blocks away. The yard was larger than the others had been and was already mowed. Inside the house was very neat, large closets, a bay window in the living room, and a new kitchen appliances. Neil really liked it, except that it had a TV in the living room. He really wanted to live without the computer. The thought of Jeeves listening to him sleep gave him the willies. "Look, Sam, don't you have a place with no TV? I'd really like to get away from it all a little more." "Oh, I can fix that. We just unplugged the thing." Sam lifted the TV off the wall, and it came away with no problem. There was no wire connecting it to the wall, so what did that mean? It could have batteries in it, which kept it listening and reporting on him whether it was on the wall or not. As Neil considered it, he realized that there was no way he would ever be sure that he was free of observers. There could be computers in almost anything in the house. That would be true of any house unless he built it himself from trees he grew himself. He mentally shrugged his shoulders and gave up. "So, do you want me to put it in the closet or something, or take it back to the store?" "No, Sam, I've changed my mind. Just leave it there on the wall. Who knows, maybe I'll want to see some news of the Middle East one day." "Does that mean you'll take this house?" "Yes, I guess it does." "Do we see the owner next?" "You're seeing him now, friend. This is one of my houses." "Sam, you flatter me. That's one of the nicest things anybody ever did for me." "I don't think I'll regret it. There'll be a $25 per month luxury rent unless you find some way to use that extra room in the shed out back for your work." "Sounds okay to me. Where do I go to sign the papers?" "We can use the TV here to do the trick." "Hal, Neil wants this house. Still the $25 a month for a single person?" The TV indicated in Hal's voice that Sam was correct. Then Jeeves addressed Hal, asking, "Do you, Neil Campbell, choose to purchase the right to live in this house in Aldie, Virginia, beginning now and ending on this date 1 month from now?" "Yes," said Neil. If you would be so good, sir, as to repeat the words as I have them on the screen. Your full voluntary consent is required for spending the money." "Okay, Jeeves. I, Neil Campbell, choose to purchase the right to live at this house in Aldie, Virginia, beginning now and ending on this date 1 month from now. Does that do it, Jeeves?" "Very good, sir. The purchase is complete. You now have $84,478.28 remaining in your account, sir." "So, Sam, what are you going to do with the $25 a month?" "What $25? "The $25 I'm paying in rent." "That was your money. Once you spent it, it ceased to exist. Your account was decreased in size by $25, but no one else's account changed at all because of that. Certainly not mine. Oh, and by the way, don't imply to anyone else that you think they received money directly from you. They'd be insulted." "Sam, why? What's insulting about paying you money?" "First off, it makes you sound like one of those palm people. Second, it implies that I'm one of those palm people. Third, it says that I can't be trusted. It says that you don't trust me. Fourth, it says the only reason I rented you my house is that I was getting bribed to do so. If I did accept a bribe to let you live here, then I'd probably be cheating my suppliers out of some money. The guys who built this house, the people who have repaired it from time to time, the plumber, the electrician, the heating guy, the guy who brings the fuel oil, they all should be paid for their work, and I'm reducing the chances they'll be paid and lowering the amount they will be paid." Sam sounded like he would keep on going for a while, so Neil was holding up his hand, palm out, and shaking his head. "No, Sam, I never said any of those things. I didn't even think them." "It's what you're saying by claiming that you're giving me money for rent, Hal. The payers pay me for letting you use my house. The payers pay the other people who built it and who repaired it and who maintain it. If I were to allow someone in here who was going to tear it up or who was a slacker or whatever, I'd be costing them money. There isn't any reason for you to pay me a bribe unless I wouldn't let you rent the house. If I had a reason to not let you rent the house, then I shouldn't let a bribe change my mind." "But Sam, if it's your house, why would anyone else get paid for my living here?" "I don't exactly have title to this house. I think that's still in the hands of old Mrs. Barker, whose land this house is on. She lives up the street a few houses. The builder got her permission about 8 years ago to build here and got the materials from the lumber yard over in Gilbert's Corner. He has a regular crew of guys who work with him on his projects, and they came in here and put this place up real quick. Well, I have a pretty good reputation in this area for real estate, so he gave it to me to rent out to anybody I choose. So old Mrs. Barker, the builder, all the guys on his crew, the guys over in the lumber yard who helped out, the guys who supplied them, the guys who gave the builder the tools he used, it just goes on and on. They all helped to get this house here for you to benefit from by living in. Now, none of them paid any of the others. Not that lumberjack who cut the tree, not the guy who owned the forest, not the sawmill folks, not the secretaries in the trucking office who scheduled the delivery of supplies, not the guys who pushed the nails, not the glass makers, the appliance makers. Not one of all of us folks paid any of the others anything. Why? Because we knew the payers would pay them. None of us had to worry about any of those payments. We didn't have to pay taxes on what we've been paid either. And when you've lived here a month, we'll each get paid a bit more, and we won't have to pay attention to any of that either. All of us get paid because we all deserve to be paid for what we did and what I'm doing. Now do you see? Okay, I think I see. You all get paid because what you did is good for me now. The payers keep track of all that? They sure do. I don't know how they do it, but they do. You can look at my work record, and if you go down far enough, you can see things like 42 cents for telling the handyman that a window was broken on a house. Of course, that's just a one-time payment for me, but the handyman, he'll get paid as long as people use the house and that window is doing its job. So I guess to say you accepted money directly from me would be like saying that you were saying that none of those other people had anything to do with the house, that you built it all yourself of materials that you produced for yourself and whose raw materials you owned, and using tools that you made yourself. I guess it would be saying that you weren't a part of the community of people that you cooperated with. It's like you were rejecting all of them and denying their existence. Neil was not even noticing Sam now, lost in a reverie. He had never in his life looked at things that way, and the experience was strange indeed. I think you understand. We're all cooperating to make things better for all of us. If you have the money in your account, that means that you're cooperating too. It means that you can be trusted. Neil, the size of your account would get almost any ordinary person to cooperate with you. It says all sorts of good things about you. So Neil got a house to live in, and a new way of looking at buying things. The next day he moved in with his suitcases. He didn't need the services of a mover, whom Sam had suggested. Rose asked him what he thought about Sam, and Neil was able to say he was impressed without even trying to be polite. On the way back to Brianna's, Neil thought of shopping for some gifts for Brianna, Tony, and the children. Driver, I need to do some shopping for gifts for my adult daughter and her family. Is there some place we'll go by that would be good for that? Sure, we go past a shopping mall in about half a mile. You must have seen it on the way out. I was kind of distracted on the way out. When the bus stopped several blocks later, the driver said, Here we are, Frobisher Mall. That's it? But it's so small. It's got over 150 stores. Besides, it's bigger than it looks. Wait till we get inside. I'll show you, mister. I'm doing some shopping myself. Just come along with me. Neil turned and was smiled at by a dark-haired woman who looked to be in her 40s. She was dressed informally but attractively, but none of her clothing was white. To Neil, this meant that she was probably pretty well off, but if she was well off, why was she riding the bus? Neil smiled back at her. Thanks. My name's Neil Campbell, and I'm rather new here and don't know my way around very well yet. Neil slicked his hair back on the left side a little nervously, thinking he must look a mess. Right this way, Neil, she said cheerily, and stepped lightly off the bus onto the sidewalk. You can call me Nita, as in Juanita. The vista that greeted Neil as he left the bus reminded him of a small orchard full of parked cars. The leaves on the trees were still relatively new and had a light green cast. Many were in the late stages of flowering, and fallen petals littered the ground and dusted those cars parked under them. Neil and his guide followed a slightly curving path made of stone around and through the trees toward the facade of the mall which Neil had seen from the bus. As they neared the mall, it was clear that it was larger than Neil had thought, because it was only 1 story tall, and most of that was obscured by trees. I heard that you were shopping for your daughter's family. What did you have in mind to get? Perhaps I can tell you which stores to go to first. That would be very helpful. I hadn't really thought about what to get yet. What's she like, your daughter? What are her hobbies and interests? She's an artist. What kind? Painting, sculpture, quilts? She paints and stuff. Well, that's out then. She gets all her painting gear for free unless she's just doing it as a hobby, and you wouldn't want to get the wrong thing. I gather that you aren't a painter yourself? No, I hardly know one end of the paintbrush from another, and once you get past canvas, easel, and paint, I don't know what an artist even needs. As they approached the building, Neil saw quite a few other people entering and leaving through the dozen or so automatic doors. A few of those leaving were being followed by what looked like small all-terrain vehicles which, rather than handlebars and seats, had large baskets on top, which held nondescript boxes and sacks. The wheels were large and appeared to be quite soft. Some of the vehicles had children riding on them as well as on what appeared to be merry-go-round horses or other animals. Each vehicle was following a particular individual. There were other such vehicles empty which were returning to the mall on their own. It appeared that they were intelligent. The building itself was faced with brick and had no windows, and no store names or signs other than a large metal plate to the right of the doors which proclaimed this to be Frobisher Mall. Passing through the second set of doors that comprised the inner side of the airlock, Neil could see that there were a few of the vehicles outside most of the larger stores. He could also see that there were escalators going down to lower levels of the mall. There seemed to be several of the below-ground levels. The mall really was quite a bit larger than it appeared from the outside. "What else does she do for fun?" "She used to like to go hiking and camping out. I don't know if she still does that or not." "You don't seem to know her very well." Neil brushed the hair back on the left again and confessed that he had been out of the country for over 15 years and hadn't seen her in all that time. "Looks like you're going to have a real job on your hands picking a gift for her, Neil." "Well, this is where I'm going. I'd try to help you think of something, but my appointment was for 5 minutes ago, and Andre hates to be kept waiting. It was nice meeting you. Best of luck on your gift hunt." "Thanks, you've been a big help already," Neil said, and waved goodbye to her as she turned to enter a hairstyling salon. "Looks like I'm on my own. Okay, let's see what we have here." The shoppers came and went, some carrying packages. Occasionally one would walk by, followed by one of the self-directed baskets with one or more items aboard. The stores had samples of their wares displayed in brightly lighted windows. The lighting seemed to simulate sunlight, which Neil appreciated. Most of the stores were specialty shops. The diversity was remarkable to Neil, especially after the life he had been living in captivity. The first store he tried was a jewelry store. The glass counters, with their sparkling display, looked just as he would have expected. Each item had its own price tag, but what should he get for Brianna? She already had a wedding ring, and he had no idea what kind of ring she would like. Perhaps a brooch or pin or earrings would be best. Wait, does Bri wear earrings? Does she have any clothes that would go well with a brooch? Perhaps a necklace? No. On second thought, that would be just a symbolic present. It wouldn't really improve her life. Jewelry looks good, but how would that make her life better? Neil turned and went back into the concourse. Clothing? How can I pick something for her to wear? I don't even know her sizes. Some kind of hat or gloves or... How about boots, hiking boots? Surely she still likes nature and the outdoors. But what size boots would she wear? If you're going to walk all day in a pair of shoes, they had better fit really well. No, boots are out. Where's a gift shop when you need one? Neil said in frustration. Almost any store that sells luxuries can be a gift shop, sir, Jeeves said. You can buy a luxury and give it to whomever you like, so long as the person is not a payer, of course. Jeeves, is that you? Where are you? I'm speaking to you from the speaker to your left. It's built into the decorations on the wall. Okay, as long as you're up. What should I get Brianna as a gift? Neil asked, his voice dripping sarcasm. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to say, sir. That would violate Brianna's privacy. You mean you know what she needs and you won't tell me what it is? Oh, no, sir. If she needed something, of course I could tell others that she had that need. It's just that I cannot tell you what she would like to receive as a present. A present is a luxury, and therefore she doesn't really need it. Well, I need to pick out a present for her and for her husband and children. Then perhaps, sir, you should consult the staff of one or more of the stores in the shopping mall. They don't know Brianna. How can they help? I couldn't say, sir, but their job is to help you find what will please you. Perhaps they have some experience with solving problems like yours. Maybe they do. Picking a shop almost at random, Neil wandered in and looked around for a sales clerk. A small, dark brown woman with a red spot in the center of her forehead and wearing a sari glided smoothly toward him from the back of the dimly lighted store. She bowed slightly to Neil and asked with a pleasing, almost liquid accent if she could serve him in any way. Neil looked around him more closely and saw that the store had what appeared to his uneducated eye to be Hindu religious artifacts. Blushing slightly, Neil stammered out something about having chosen the wrong store, apologized, and hurried out. Keep your wits about yourself, he admonished himself sternly. Then he chose more carefully, a more brightly lighted little store that appeared, for all the world, to be a bookstore. One of the best things about it was that there was only one person he could see in the store. There were a number of books on a variety of topics in the display window that fronted the concourse. Neil could see through the open doorway racks and display cases of what looked like books. Upon entry, he was greeted by the store's lone occupant, a small, quiet, elderly man in a wheelchair. May I help you? He smiled, showing what appeared to be perfect and very white teeth. Neil glanced around. The number of bookcases was quite limited and seemed to have only one copy of each of the books they displayed, or what looked like books, anyway. They were all thin, and they all had plain covers with no titles showing. Some appeared to be leather-bound, and some were shiny as if plastic-covered. There were 3 large glass-top display cases like one would expect to see in a jewelry store, which contained what obviously were real books, since they were of varying thicknesses and sizes. Some were obviously old as well. Yes, I'm looking for a gift for my adult daughter, and I thought you might be able to help me decide what to give her. I think I may be able to do something for you. My name is Stan, he said, extending his right hand toward Neil. I'm Neil, Neil said, figuring Stan would spell it wrong, but not really caring as he shook the man's surprisingly strong hand. First, does she collect books? Stan said, shifting his seating slightly in the chair and making a sweeping gesture around the room. The The large mirrors on every wall all gestured as well. Not that I know of, Neil said, brushing his hair back with his left hand, and the Neils around the room likewise straightened their hair, some using their right hand and some their left. That's okay. If she has an interest in almost any subject, there'll probably be quite a number of books that will deal with it in a variety of ways. I wasn't actually, that is, Neil thought, what a mess. Here I am in a bookstore, and I almost told him I didn't intend to buy her a book. Despite the pleasant temperature of the room, Neil began to sweat a little. Well, I know she's interested in art. She paints. She's even shown a few paintings, I think. But the problem there is that I know practically nothing about art. I don't think I could judge what kind of art book she'd like. You see, I've been out of the country over 15 years, and I've kind of lost touch with her, and I just got back in the country a few days ago, and, well, I'd like to get her something, but it won't really help, you know. What won't help? Neil's eyebrows went up in surprise. Buying her a gift won't make up at all for your being away from her for such a long time. Nothing can make up for that. Neil started to interrupt, but the old man held up his palm toward Neil and continued, It doesn't matter why you weren't with her. Her feelings are quite irrational. Even if you were kidnapped and held captive for those 15 years, she'd still feel hurt that you weren't with her, and there's nothing you can do about that at all. He paused for dramatic effect. But you can show her that you love her now, he said, pointing and jabbing his finger into the palm of his other hand. And now you are with her again. Neil felt a prickle down his spine at the mention of being kidnapped. Surely the old man couldn't have known. The computer could have told him. No, Jeeves wouldn't tell me about Brianna, and I'm her father, unless it's a plot. Maybe this is all some kind of a setup. Maybe... Neil? Hello? The old man was peering intently at Neil's face as Neil appeared to him to be in a trance. Oh, sorry. I sort of zoned out there. Probably the medicine I'm taking. I'm all right. I really am taking those damn pills they gave me in London, Neil thought in justification for his lie. Of course, I can't really blame them for my getting spooked. I understand what you're saying, Stan, about not being able to make up for my time away. I'm not really trying to erase past sins. I just wanted to do something nice for her, to make her life more pleasant. And I'm having an awful time thinking of what to get her. Then let's start with the books. We can always use them as a springboard to some other item if a book doesn't seem like the thing. We have everything here from comic books to rare Bibles. We have books for reading and books for investment. We have books of pictures and books of equations. Let's explore. He grinned up at Neil in appreciation of his own joke about exploring the small shop. He turned his chair with a practiced movement of his arms, spinning it as if it were almost friction-free, and directed Neil toward the nearest display case. You're really good with that chair, but I would have expected something electric, Neil commented, trying to delay the inevitable need to make a decision. I've had lots of practice with chairs like this. They tried to get me to use one of those motorized numbers, but I need the exercise, and I don't want to get stuck with all that weight if something goes wrong or it runs out of juice. Couldn't you have the handrails on the chair, even if it was electric? Sure, but it's so damned heavy from the batteries and electric motor and all that, it's like driving a truck. No, I'll stick with my very primitive apparatus here. Let the youngsters have those new spiders and centipedes. Insects? That's what I call these new devices. Here, I'll show you. Minerva, put some of those new mobility devices on the screen. Neil jumped from the mirror in front of him, ceased being a mirror, and revealed itself to be a display screen. He felt, once again, the prickling of the hair on his neck and the sick, uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. Clearly he wasn't alone with the old man, despite the lack of other customers in the store, and clearly the computer was very much watching and listening. The mirror showed a man in a chair-like device that had 6 flexible appendages radiating out from the central seat. They supported the seat and moved the man upstairs and over, under, and around other obstacles. When the going was narrow, they scrunched up under the seat, and when turning a corner at a running speed, they spread wide and tilted the seat so that the rider, Neil could hardly think of him as merely sitting in a chair, the rider did not have to shift his weight at all. The seat also was able to open doors using a doorknob or other handle, and even opened a barbed wire fence gate and closed it without getting entangled in the wire. When it approached a water hazard, it probed for the depth and footing before moving forward each step, and lifted both the seat and the occupant's legs and feet above the level of the water. That's for folks who still have use of their arms, the elderly man said, glancing at Neil out of the corner of his eye. He must have seen Neil's reaction to the mirror. For those who are even less able, and the view screen now showed a device that must have had at least 10 appendages, they have this monstrosity. Doesn't that look like a centipede to you? The passenger was prone in this model, but otherwise the device behaved in a fashion quite similar to the 6-legged seat. However, it was able to keep the occupant level when going upstairs and also to tilt the occupant to the side for tight corners so the person could be bent at the waist. It was even able to hold the person upright with supports that wrapped around the occupant and supported the head. In that posture, the four appendages near the feet were the only ones in contact with the floor or ground. A parade scene was shown with the person being held vertically high enough to see over the members of the crowd. "It does look rather like a big bug," Neil said. "That's amazing. I had no idea they could do such things." "You've been out of the country. It must have been pretty primitive for you not to have heard of things like these." "Yeah, dirt floors and all that. But about that gift—" Neil didn't feel comfortable talking with a stranger about his captivity. He felt almost ashamed of it now. So deciding about the gift became the lesser conversational evil. "Does she like antiques, or was there some children's book that she was very fond of when growing up?" "There were lots of books she liked, but I can't remember any one book that was dominant. Nothing that she carried around with her all the time or anything like that." "Then we should probably skip the rare books and old books," he said with a sigh. "What's wrong with just a regular book that isn't rare or old?" "I'll show you what's wrong. Grab any of those books off that rack over there. Your choice." Neil obediently selected a book with a dark blue simulation of leather for its cover and turned back to the clerk. He looked at the binding, but there was no title. He opened the book, but though there were about 150 pages, there was nothing printed on any of them. "It's blank." "Yeah, they're all like that." "But what good are they? You can't read blank pages." "Minerva, make it Tom Sawyer," the clerk said. Neil glanced down at the book again, and now it had a picture on the front of a boy standing before a partially whitewashed fence, wearing a straw hat and gesturing with a paintbrush toward the work in progress, and smiling at another boy somewhat better dressed, who was holding an apple. Neil opened the book, and it was filled with print. He riffled through the pages and saw that some even had pictures. "Would you like a different font type or size? You can have more or less pictures. You can have an index. You can have definitions of any of the words or phrases you don't understand. You can have what the critics said about the book at the time or in later periods. You can get descriptions of parallels between Samuel Clemens' actual life and what is depicted in the book. They can even change the texture of the so-called paper that makes up the pages." "My God, how do they do that?" "It's all in the computer, and you're really holding a kind of display screen. The computer just tells the book's chip what to display. The chip even controls the plastic of the pages to show the text or pictures in color or not. There are some that come with speakers, but those require more power, so they're heavier. These can work off the normal light in the room, like a solar-powered wristwatch, so they don't need batteries." "So I can have whatever book I want displayed here?" "Sure. What do you want to read?" "How about War and Peace?" "Look at the book." The book was still only about 150 pages, and the first few pages showed the first chapter. He riffled through the pages to the end, and the last pages read like he remembered the ending of the book. He opened the book in the middle, and it seemed to be from the middle of the work. "How does it do that?" Neil asked, feeling like he was in Alice's Wonderland. "It's just adjusting to how you were looking at the book. When you go directly to the end, it figures you want to see the end of the story. When you open it in the middle, it figures you want the middle. If you read straight through, whenever you close the book, it readjusts to put where you were at the bookmark there in the middle of the book, unless you were near enough to the beginning or the end to make that adjustment unnecessary. That way it can put a 1,000-page novel in only about 150 pages just by shifting around which pages are being shown." "So if I buy this book, I'm really buying a display terminal that can display any book at all?" "Probably not any book at all, but darn near it. Of course, you have to be where the computer can communicate with the terminal, but that's most places these days." "But why are you unhappy with this? It seems like a miracle." "Smell it." Neil held it to his nose, but there was no discernible odor. "Nothing." "Now look at the dust on it. See any?" "No, there's no dust on it at all. You've kept it quite clean." "I didn't do that. They repel dust. You could leave it on a shelf for years, and it would never have any dust on it. Now fold the corner of one of those pages down and close the book on it." Neil dog-eared one of the pages and closed the book. "Now open it to that page again." Neil did so, and the page flipped back flat, just as if he had never folded it at all. "Now use this pencil and write in the margin of one of the pages." Neil tried, but the pencil wouldn't leave a mark, no matter how hard he pressed. "You also can't tear out the pages or burn them with a match flame. If you drop jelly on a page, it rinses right off without leaving a mark. That book will look just like it does now for hundreds of years. It won't take on any of the character of its readers. It's just about immune to people. It has no soul. It can be a book of pornography one minute and the Holy Bible or the Koran the next. It isn't something people would put their hand on to swear they were telling the truth. It isn't something one would illuminate or decorate or have reverence for. It isn't something a child would have any affection for any more than they have affection for a TV screen. You used to be able to tell a learned man by his library. Now all the libraries are just one book. You learn nothing about a person by seeing that they have a book, because it could be anything or nothing. You can't tell whether they've read it or not. There are no notes in the margin to tell you whether they have thought about what they've read." "I think I see what you mean," Neil said. The book had lost some of its wonder for him. It was still a technological triumph, but it was no longer a work of art. It was just a chunk of smart plastic. He replaced the book in the rack. So why do people buy a book like that? These books are luxuries. Anyone can get a plain book that does just about everything this book can do, but it won't have the cover graphics and the texture-changing features of these. Any ordinary standard book will provide the text and pictures, but the pages won't feel like a paper of any quality you like, and the cover won't look and feel like leather or whatever. People buy these to show off. They just want to impress their friends. I really don't think my daughter or her husband care about such things. And unless she likes antiques or wants to invest in rare books, she won't appreciate any of the paper books I have to sell. I guess you're right. Sorry I bothered you. Hold on. I didn't say you bothered me. It was nice to meet someone who could understand why I don't really like these new books. You're old-fashioned enough that I rather enjoy your company. It gets lonely in here sometimes. There aren't that many who collect books these days. You think people don't read as much anymore? No, from what I see in the news, people are reading more than ever. It's just books, real paper books, that are in decline. They don't even make the newspapers in paper anymore. I don't know what people use to wrap fish these days, he chuckled. With your attitude, I don't see how you sell many books at all. When I sell a book, it's because the person I sell it to really wants a book. Nobody walks out of here unsure of whether they bought the right thing. How else do you think I would rate such a prime location in such an expensive new mall? I guess I hadn't thought about it. I didn't know the mall was new. How many malls have you seen that are mostly underground, Neil? Now that you mention it, this is the only one. Why is most of it buried? There are lots of reasons. Probably the main one is it's just about immune to storms. What with the global warming and all, the hurricanes we have are getting stronger and the number of tornadoes is increasing. It seems like almost every year. They had a Class 4 tornado up in Baltimore that went right through a shopping mall about 10 years ago. It killed over 300 people when the building collapsed on them. The above-ground part of this place is built like a bunker. I guess that was the first reason they wanted to go down rather than up. Then they started figuring costs of maintenance and discovered that they could heat and cool this place for very little, and they never have to paint the part below ground. They put a TDP plant in the basement so the trash gets recycled without leaving the building, and that provides the energy we need for lighting, heating, and cooling. The place, in many ways, is like a spaceship embedded in the ground. It's almost self-sufficient. What about groundwater and earthquakes and stuff like that? And what about the cost of digging the hole? They say the longer life of the building will more than make up for the resources used in construction. I know they used the material from the hole to expand the airport downtown in D.C. You can ask the computer. Has the computer hurt your sales? Neil, you do understand, don't you, that I help people buy things, but I don't sell them things? I have these books, Stan said with a sweep of his arm toward the cases, and in a sense I own them. But really, they kind of belong to everybody and nobody until somebody buys them. Stan, that doesn't make any sense at all to me. Well, look at it this way, then. These old books were given by their owners to be sold as luxuries. They were placed in my possession, and the owners told the computer that the books were to be made available for sale. When the books get sold, the former owners will get some money from the payers. I will probably get some money, too, if I'm helpful in bringing the right books to the attention of the right buyers. But I can do whatever I want with the books. I could even destroy them. But of course, I wouldn't get paid anything for doing that, and I doubt anyone would ever again trust me with any of their luxuries. Wouldn't you go to jail? No. Why should I? That wouldn't bring the books back. The former owners have already given up their ownership of the books, and I have possession of them. I come as near to owning them as anyone does, so I wouldn't have harmed anyone else. But their former owners are expecting to get some money from your selling them. You mean from my helping find people who want to buy them? Okay, Stan, word it however you like. Sure, they'll be pissed off at me, but they made what we would have called a business decision in the old days. They decided that I would be the best person to find buyers for their books. They trusted me. If I go crazy and destroy their investment, that's just their tough luck. If they have another luxury to sell, next time they'll have to be more careful. Sounds to me like that's being pretty hard on the former owners. No more so than buying stock in a corporation in the old days. You gave them your money, and if they wasted it, you were just out of luck when the stock went down. Why would they give their books to you rather than to some organization that would compensate them for the loss of their property? First off, if they gave their books to an organization, the organization couldn't pay them for the books regardless of what happened to the books. Second, who would be responsible for the books in the organization? The whole organization would be responsible. Come on, Neil, you know better than that. Each person in that organization would blame somebody else if something happened. If they give their books to me, they know exactly who to blame if the books are damaged. You don't get that kind of responsibility in an organization. True, you got me there, but why would people buy books that you helped them with rather than from some other book dealer? Because they trust me to know the book and to tell the truth about it. They trust my judgment and knowledge of the book as to whether it's authentic or a cheap copy. I sure can't sell it to them for less money. Now that you mention it, I wasn't aware of it before, but there aren't any sale signs or money off or discounts being advertised. The mall is more like a park than a store. When you can't compete on price, you have to compete on service and quality. It's getting late, but I still don't know what to give my daughter. Thanks for your time anyway. Give her what she wants. Give her yourself. Give her the loving father she's wanted all these years. It'd be a lot cheaper to buy her a rare book. What would you pay for a daughter's love? I just hope I have that much, Neil said. Neil, if you deserve her love, you'll have more than enough. If you don't deserve her love, you'll never have enough. Now let's see if we can think of some way to show her that she has her father's love. That's what you want to gain from a gift, isn't it? I guess it is. You look pretty deep into a fellow. Did you get that from reading books? No. Unfortunately, I got it from making a lot of mistakes in my life. In that case, she's in her late 20s, married, 2 young children, she homeschools, and she likes art and camping. Now tell me the important part. Tell me why you think she might doubt your love. Neil knew exactly what Stan meant. He wouldn't be concerned so much about showing her he loved her if he was sure that she knew he loved her. You made some pretty serious mistakes, didn't you, Stan? You made some pretty serious mistakes, didn't you, Stan? Neil nodded with a somber expression on his face. I'm not in this chair for nothing, mister. I got all the guilt I can rightly handle. This chair only makes up for a little of it. My daughters know I'm in this chair, and I figure that helps them just a little to tolerate my being alive. Yes, one of the reasons I use this chair instead of one of those spider things is because of my guilt. I'll never be able to regain the love of my daughters. But I've spent years trying to imagine what I could do to deserve their love. So maybe I can help you out a little along those lines. Well, I sure don't want to live in a wheelchair, Neil said, trying to brighten the tone of what had become a rather depressing conversation. It wouldn't help you if you did. What you need to do is show your daughter that you love her. Show her in some way that is unmistakable. But it has to say love to her. What will do that for one person won't necessarily do it for someone else. Do you know your daughter well enough to know what you could do that will mean love to her? Of course I do. Sure. Okay, how does anybody know that about someone else? Get to know them really well. That means you have to actually pay attention to them. You have to notice their body language, the overtones in their voices, the times they look you in the eyes, and the times they evade your eyes. You must be quite sensitive to them and accept the truth about them, even when it hurts. In your case, since you've been away so long from your daughter, I doubt you can do it. Do you think her mother? Stan raised questioning eyebrows up at Neil. I don't think her mother will help me in this matter. She would be more likely to say, I told you so, than give me such intimate information about our daughter. Then you can't know what to do. You can only guess. But I can tell you this much. If you really love her, you won't be able to hide it. It'll be there for her to see if only she can let herself see it. On the other hand, if you only tell yourself you love, you really don't. Then that too will be obvious. And I guess what I'm telling you is don't worry about it. Relax. Do what feels right to you at the moment. Trust your instincts. Don't be ashamed to let your feelings show. Eventually, if she can forgive you, she will. Has that worked for you? No, but it's only been 20 years. I still have hope. And in case I don't live much longer, I'm keeping a diary. It's in proper paper books with good leather bindings. I think at least one of them may read from them and learn something about how I feel. It isn't much, but it seems right somehow. You know, Stan, I'm really glad it was your shop I wandered into. I didn't realize what I was feeling until I saw it in you. But one thing still puzzles me. Why didn't you try to sell me a book? You didn't really want a book. It wouldn't have made you happy. You'd have been wasting your money. That would have done you no good. I get paid for helping people, not talking them into wasting their money on things they don't really want. I'll see if I can't find some way to give her myself. You might try taking her out to eat. Most mothers really like not having to cook and clean up. I'll think about it. They shook hands again, and Neil turned and left the little shop. What do you think, Minerva? Do you think he loves his daughter? We go through this every time, Stan, the young woman's voice said. You know that isn't something I can give you information about. Stan sat alone in his shop of books and things that looked like books and stared painfully at his hands in his lap.
Thank you for attending today's presentation of Invisible Hand by Larry K. Mason, brought to you by gaytalkradio.org and queerpublicradio.com. We hope you will join us tomorrow as the story continues at 9 p.m. Eastern Time and 6 p.m. Pacific Time. In case you've missed any of the episodes, you may listen to them by visiting queerpublicradio.com or by visiting Mr. Mason's website at www.nopom.info. That's www.nopom.info. Thank you for joining us. And as always, we wish the best to you and yours.